another one is orange, which just kind of means like anything goes, or like some people will use lavender for like looking for a group. But like I don't think people generally like this kind of coding in Beyblades is lost. Like most people don't know the Beyblade's color coding, and like they'll just like let it rip with whoever they can with, and then like they won't find the best like Beyblades matching that they could get. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's always best to know who you're battling when you enter the Beyblade. When you're about to let it rip, it's important because when you pull back and you want to know who's on the other side letting it rip back at you,
I think so. Like, exactly. Like I think some of the best Beyblades matches I've had, like the first message someone sent has been like, this is exactly the way I play Beyblades.
Just a photo of their colored Beyblade,
Yeah, they'll show me they're huge,
Beyblade,
huge spinner, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, absolutely. Welcome to Red Planet, a show where we talk about how to make a better world. We do not have the scrunkly little peanut, Dr. Dr. Mule today, R.I.P. But we do have beautiful Tim and beautiful Kira.
And beautiful Sophie.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Let me ask Tim, what was the most base thing you did this week?
This week, actually, yes. So, kind of a minor one, but it's still a thing. People that follow me on Twitter actually probably also saw I've been posting like little articles that have been popping up about shitty landlords that have been forced to pay back, like their tenants, like refund their portions of their rent.
Yeah, I'm seeing in chat that Kira is the only one with a live feed at the moment.
Oh yeah, what's going on here?
Gonna keep doing this.
Maybe we should.
Am I still live? Are we still live?
Redo ours.
Okay, right. Kira will just entertain everyone.
It's just a bit. I'm actually I'm holding my cup up like this. Like, you guys didn't think I could hold this still?
I want to match my exact pose when it restarts.
Oh, come on! I was about to floss.
Oh.
I like the please stand by thing. That's so cute.
Okay, should we keep talking
it's very Fallout.
Okay. Tim, no one can see us, but please tell me about the most base thing you did.
Yeah, so I'm posting a lot of these stories about like landlords that have like not lived up to their end of the bargain, having to pay back and stuff. And the reason I was posting a lot of that kind of stuff is because a friend of mine was in one of our group chats and was like, hey, does anyone know anything about like what you can do if your landlord hasn't done this, blah blah blah. So I was able to send them like a bunch of really good resources, and also just those news articles that were examples of people that were in their exact situation who were able to get like thousands of dollars of their rent refunded because their landlord wasn't providing and it's like basic stuff like not having an insulated house, which down here we have an agreement where it's like the healthy homes bill or some shit like that, where landlords have to do those certain things. So so that's probably it for me. What about Soph? What about you? What was the most base thing you did this week?
I did release my Yay video, which I'd encourage people to check out. I'm just taking the opportunity to promote it because I am locked on Twitter right now, so I can't promote it there.
Sophie, what did you do?
I said some of my favorite words. And some people had a problem with it. But actually, I think the most base thing I did this week was I've been checking in on Kira because I know that she works too hard and doesn't make time for herself. So I've been sending an occasional message to just say, "Hey, I hope you're doing stuff you like and having a nice time."
In the Patreon Discord, I'm just saying I've just added a meme to give in the funny memes channel to give further context to Sophie's ban. That's cool.
I know the most base thing Sophie's doing next week is holding herself accountable for her poor use of words on Twitter. So she's going to issue an apology. She's going to do better. She's going to stay quiet for a bit and like listen and just absorb what other people have to tell
her.
her.
That's right.
She is listening.
I will be I will be based next week by no longer describing myself with terms that put me in political and social community with people who face the same kinds of oppression as me. And that will surely lead to liberation.
On your body.
I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, Kira, what was the most base thing you did this week?
Well, I also checked in on Sophie, which is something that I've been, it's not just something that like I want to do for Sophie, but it's also like a lot of it for me, because I'm always really bummed out at how much I don't reach out to my own friends, and I don't just like how good it feels like when you check in on me, Sophie. It feels so good. It feels really good to feel like somebody else is thinking about you and cares about you enough to just even send you like a little message. It doesn't have to be a big thing, you know? Yeah. And so I was reached out to Sophie this past week. And so I think that was good for both of us.
We got each other's backs. It's good.
Yeah, it feels good. I also bullied some people on Twitter for playing the Hogwarts game. And
is that out yet, or
that's
is it
based?
Like... And also Twitch just recently banned somebody for this is not as based or anything, but it's just an extension of what I was doing on Twitter, trying to defend yet another streamer for being banned for anti-white racism on Twitch.
Oh my God.
Again, and not really something base, but just I wanted to throw it out there. This platform is there's a reason we phrase the stuff in the way we phrase it here on Red Planet. This platform is not very kind to movements like ours. And I just want to remind people that Twitch has banned me like 10 times now, I think. And the last time they banned me was for 2 weeks for grouping white men with my commentary. So just to make everyone aware of what this platform is capable of.
If anyone's missing my use of gamer words on Twitter this week, you can find me on Mastodon and on Tumblr, where I promise to use as many gamer words as possible. And Jess in chat just said, Sophie, that's true. I'll be using them there. I will. I promise. Jess has just said in chat, if it makes you feel better, Mallory Moore, who is a fantastic and prolific trans activist in the UK, is also currently banned for calling herself certain words. So that's really good.
So you're amongst good company.
That is true. But how about some news? I say, hoping to shift it onto someone else to talk, but then realizing that I am doing the first news item this week. So everyone listen up, because there was a big protest in Germany against coal mine explosion. Thousands of people demonstrated in persistent rain on Saturday to protest the clearance and demolition of a village in Western Germany that is due to make way for the expansion of a coal mine. The notes here, this is why I stumbled on the title, because it said explosion, and I was like, hang on, what? I thought it was an okay, whatever.
I think, like, I don't know what. Yeah, I think I wasn't sure what they meant as well there in the headlines. Is it like, do they mean that it's like an explosion of coal mine activity, or like? Cool. All right, so basically the place is called Lützerath, which is, and it's, as we said, it's like a small village, and they just want to demolish the fucking village. Cool. Great. Isn't it great living in an economy? Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg joined the demonstrations as they protested the clearance of Lützerath, walking through the nearby village of Kienberg and past muddy fields. Protesters chanted, "Every village stays and you are not alone." According to the organizers, there were about 35,000 people who took part. The police who showed up were only about 15,000. So when we talked before about like when this can come down to like the state or the people, it's really, I think, just really important to remember that it's not impossible at all for like people to outnumber the number of cops that they can send somewhere, like even by huge figures like this. On sidelines of the protest, police said people broke through their barriers and some got into the Garzweiler coal mine. So that's cool as well, that like the protesters are actually taking it like to the mine. Thunberg said the fate of Lützerath and the expansion of the mine matters far beyond Germany, which if they're doing this shit, they're gonna environmentalists say bulldozing the village to expand the Garzweiler coal mine would result in huge amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, obviously, and also like bulldozing a village, just like fucking don't do that. And the government and utility company are
RWE, I don't know what that stands for, argue that coal is needed to ensure Germany's energy security, which, like, wow, we just can't find any other way to ensure Germany's energy security. It's fucked up. We're all looking for the guy who did this.
Yeah.
The regional
it's
and national.
It's like the energy security versus like, like, I mean, the climate security or anything like that. Like, fuck off.
Yeah. Like, well, I would like the security of the ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Anyway, the regional and national governments, both of which include environmentalist Green Party, reached it because, for those who don't know, Germany has what's it called? Like it's a combined like representational democracy.
Is it a mixed member sort of thing? Like that's what we have down here.
Yeah, it's like even the territories that it's split up into will like have a mixed number of like members representing where the votes went. Like if you look at the electoral maps of Germany, they'll have like some regions that are striped in different colors because like multiple different parties will get into government for that region.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So the regional and national governments, both of which include the environmentalist Green Party, reached a deal with RWE last year, allowing it to destroy the abandoned village. Oh, I didn't know it was abandoned. Okay. but leave it alone, in return for ending coal use by 2030 rather than 2038, which like is a really strange way to end coal use by like 8 years sooner, is by opening a new mine now.
And we all know that's not how it works. It's literally not how it works. When they open these mines, there's a certain shelf life that these mines like have to live through in order to make them profitable. And so they necessarily are not going to stop this in 8 years. Yeah, like it's not happening.
7 years
also,
now, like
the thing about the abandoned village is kind of weird framing because so the residents had been relocated from the village, but also people, when all this started kicking off, activists and stuff started moving back into the village. So it was kind of the same as like what happened at Iamata. There was like initially a very small actual like local population, but then people moved in and kind of, like re-inhabited the area. So I think there was like a couple hundred people living there, like activists sort of thing. So so it's not like it was just like a couple empty houses or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a very funny video from the confrontation between police and protesters. I don't know if we have that. Hopefully we can pull that up.
I put it in on-air text chat. I put two actually. One of them is the funny one. The other one is just I wanted to show. It shows Greta Thunberg with a bunch of activists just trying to peacefully resist, the expansion of this fossil fuel factory, and it's just I just want to make it very clear just who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. Like, it's very obvious to everyone watching this show. And so the funny video will also demonstrate that very clearly. It's just hilarious to watch. But like, it's so clear. This is a peaceful protest. Not that it has to be in order for it to be, like, considered like
valid
fighting
or whatever.
For the valid or fighting for the good guys. I'm trying to be very careful the way I word this. It's just like, I wonder if any of these cops at any point are like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And I feel like that video with Greta Thunberg is for me, it's like screams like, yo, what cops at any point while you're doing this, are you thinking, what am I doing here?
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like, I don't know. I've said before that I think that more cops will quit as their job is increasingly just like brutalizing people who are either looking to meet their own basic needs or protesting because they want everyone's basic needs met. And like more and more cops will just be like, what the fuck am I doing? But like, and also that we already are kind of starting to see that as a trend. That's something that's happened.
That's definitely happened. Like it happened down at Iamata. There were a couple that were just like, wait a minute, like, this is kind of fucked up. Like even some people that were like, wow, okay, I actually recognize the people on the other side of the line. And I mean, it was also a thing in the in the Russian Revolution as well, where, like some of the cops were just like, actually, it ended up being a lot of the cops in the army that were just like, actually, wait a minute, like, why are we fighting our, like our fellow citizens on behalf of...
There's that side of it. And there's also the side of it that's like, when you brutalize peaceful protest, people are like, well, I'm going to get the same pushback if I show up here with like armed and ready to defend myself from the cops. So I might as well not get like my legs broken or whatever.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you see how peaceful protest just literally doesn't result in anything. Like it might result in a heightened awareness for the public to know that there's an issue. But at a certain point, all the awareness in the world doesn't change anything unless direct action is taken against those systems.
We do not support breaking the law here on Red Planet because the law is the arbiter of it is moral, and therefore things that are illegal are not only illegal but also wrong. And we love Joe Biden, and we also, although we don't endorse breaking the law, we do endorse reading How to Blow Up a Pipeline by Andreas Bell.
And if it does happen, we will report on it. So
we will tell you it's happened, and that is all.
So did we show the video with getting stuck in mud? By the way, did we show that?
Yeah. I think
the funny video was great.
Okay.
Sorry. So Thunberg said, it's very weird to see the German government, including the Green Party, make deals and compromise with companies like RWE, with fossil fuel companies, when they should rather be held accountable for all the damage and destruction they've caused, which, is a pretty good summary. And many of the protesters have now left, but there are two protesters who nickname themselves Pinky and Brain, like the Pinky, and they are currently holed up in a tunnel in the mine. So solidarity and best luck and Godspeed to Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What are we going to do tomorrow night, Pinky? Overthrow the state.
I wonder if Pinky and the Brain, hopefully they'll come out of this unscathed if they want to talk about their experience on Red Planet.
Yeah, that would be
Pinky and Brain, if you're out there.
If you're watching.
Okay. So Tim, you want to tell me this news?
Cool. All right, so the next one that we've got here is a bit of it's like kind of a complicated situation, but the headline: Hanged Erdogan effigy protest in Sweden angers Turkey. And so, you might be wondering,
it's Erdogan, yeah.
Oh, Erdogan, yeah. I don't speak Turkish. I'm sorry. So anyway, so why would people care if a protest in Sweden angers Turkey? Well, it's because Sweden are trying to get into NATO, but to get into that, like basically everyone has to tick the box and say that you're okay with that. So Turkey has said, wait, we don't want them to join NATO until they extradite all of these people that we classify as criminals. And they've given a big list. And some of these people are people that have been in trouble in Turkey, but have, been to jail for it and been released. Or some of them are people that haven't even committed any crimes or anything. There's literally just members of the Turkish Communist Party that, have fled Turkey, and just, all kinds of stuff. Like a lot of activists and people like that shouldn't be in jail.
We touched on something a few weeks ago that a protester in Britain in London was arrested just for holding up a pro-Kurdish flag, and it's the same thing you're talking about there. Turkey gets to say to the UK, you have to arrest people who are pro-Kurdish as terrorists because of NATO, basically.
Yeah, but it's it is ridiculous. So some activists, they made a big hanging upside down effigy of, is it Erdogan? Yeah, and and evoking the image of Benito Mussolini being hung upside down in the square. And there was even there was a quote from one of them. What was it? Take the chance to step down now, so you don't end up upside down in Taksim Square. Which is saying to him you're a fascist leader,
Organize, the anarchist magazine that Mule and I subscribe to, makes a policy of always printing pictures of Mussolini's granddaughter upside down.
That's brilliant. But so it's like a ridiculous demand, but it's also it's a huge flex by Turkey, right? But and I mean there's people in Sweden that are protesting this, saying that this is ridiculous, Turkey are unreasonable. There's also people in Sweden saying why the fuck do we want to join NATO anyway? You know, like, you know, what's that? What will that do for us? Which is like extremely, you know, like it's a good point, and that's more the point that I would personally align with, you know.
Absolutely. There's also like having been to Sweden, there is like an ongoing climate there of like Russia is just over there, and there's a lot of fear of retaliation from Russia, and they're kind of, I would say, like, as well as everything else wrong with joining NATO, it's like they're really conscious that like being in NATO would make them kind of actively hostile with a seaborder to Russia,
part of the war. But so both Sweden and Finland applied to join NATO only after the actual Russia-Ukraine war kicked off. And and so it was only Turkey that was like, no, you know. So
Thanks, Turkey.
and there's other demands and stuff, but you know, this is the major one. 73 and so they are referring to them as terrorists. They're not saying like criminals or people of interest or anything, calling them terrorists. And some of these people are literally just journalists. So it's huge fascism moment, epic fascism moment from Turkey. So if they do reject the demands, it will be kind of interesting to see how Turkey push back from that, because I mean, it could be a bluff. They could just be like, okay, whatever. But it could, you know, spark a greater divide, you know, within the NATO countries themselves. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But in general, I think I think I sympathize with the people of Sweden and Finland who, you know, who the people that have relocated to there, like the asylum seekers, and even just like the regular people that have just moved there, who are, you know, like worried that this could, you know, like that they could be handed over. I don't think they will be. I think it's very unlikely that they will be. But I would like to maybe hear some more from them. So I don't know, it would be cool to try and touch base with someone from, you know, because it seems like a lot of these people are kind of online people. I did have a look at some profiles on some of them, but there's some of them that are literally just like teachers and stuff now. So it's anyway, so the next we got a little piece here, Kira, about Indonesia. You want to take us through that?
And I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of the President Joko Widodo, is that right? Or I think people call him Jokowi for short.
I'm not.
I hope I am not butchering that too horribly. Basically, the Jokowi, the president, expressed deep regret on Wednesday over the gross human rights violations during Indonesia's big massacre and imprisonment of like tons of communists in the 60s. So let me pull up this. So he expresses regret, and this is the big problem here. He's expressing regret for the egregious human rights violations in the country over the past 6 decades, including in the 60s, a US-backed anti-communist purge that led to the massacre of some 500,000 Indonesians during the height of the Cold War. And he promised to prevent similar violations from happening again, but he stopped short of explicitly admitting that the government played a direct role in this and did not.
We're all trying to find the guy that did this.
He didn't express any sort of like, you know, commitment to pursue any sort of accountability with the government or anything like that. He's just saying that these events are regrettable, including the extrajudicial executions carried out. He's saying, with a clear mind and an earnest heart, I, as an Indonesian's head of state, admit that gross human rights violations did happen in many occurrences. I have sympathy and empathy for the victims and their families. So people are very appropriately kind of not excited about this type of announcement, just saying, like, giving the whole like Libby type of thoughts and prayers. Oh boy, isn't that so sad? But not at all acknowledging the direct involvement that the Indonesian government had in these massacres. It also should be said, since I don't want to spend too much time because we do have a lot of stories to go through, it should also be said that recently declassified documents by the State Department show that despite having intimate knowledge about what was happening at the time, the U.S. stood by as the massacres unfolded in Indonesia, and in some cases lent direct support to those forces to carry out the slaughter. Mind you, about 500,000 murders, and this is an anti-communist purge, and millions imprisoned as well.
And so
it reached like a fever pitch of like anyone who someone was like, that guy's a communist, like would be killed by the people who were doing it. Like, it was a real witch hunt. If people want to learn more about the anti-communist purge in Indonesia, the documentary The Art of Killing and the book The Jakarta Method are both fantastic.
I'm gonna drop a link in the chat, which is linked from one of the news articles there, just in the Atlantic, about like the US involvement specifically.
I should also be said really briefly that the defense minister of Indonesia right now, Prabowo Subianto, has for years faced allegations that he participated and oversaw some of the country's worst human rights violations. And in August, he says he's planning on running for president in 2024. So keep an eye out for that. Anyways.
Tim, do you want to tell us about France?
All right, cool. So all of the major French unions have got together and are calling for a strike on January the 19th. So a couple days away. This is sparked by the French government have said that they are going to raise the retirement age before you can get a pension, which so they're saying that this is this is good for the economy because, like a couple more years of working for everyone means that they're, contributing to the economy versus and also the government coffers, before they have to pay out the pensions, they get to hold on to their money for a couple more years, and which has been met by like universal condemnation from like all of the major unions. And so, this is the first time in a long time, in about 12 years, that they've all got together. This is like, this is like the, what do they call it in Lord of the Rings? Everyone gets together and they're like, they have their big hooey, and they're like, all right, cool.
Voltron.
The Voltron. That's in Lord of the Rings.
I remember when they used that to defeat Sauron.
But I'm not a nerd, so I don't.
Everyone check out the people using their political voice to tell the government we think that's unacceptable. I wonder if there are lessons to be learned here. I wonder if this will come up again in the news later today.
So so there's also so they decided to do it quickly because they were like, we got to move on this because this is this is big. But also there's so one of the left-wing parties over there, the LFI, La France Insoumise, I don't know, they were they had already been kind of calling for some kind of industrial action, and there's like a youth march that is like coming up as well, that it's called the March for Our Pensions, that a bunch of different organizations like based around young activists are kind of getting together, because that's like the thing, right? It's like there's like a lot of these people that and responsible for this kind of legislation, they're not the ones that are actually ever going to have to deal with it or whatever. So,
of course,
understandably, the young people get pissed off because, it's going to affect them. Like, it's going to affect old people now, whatever. Yeah. But in the long run, I think it's good for younger people to keep an eye down the line on shit like that as well. But so 8 different big gigantic unions all getting together, and they're gonna put together a general strike in a couple of days' time. So I guess next week we will see how that has progressed. There's already been some really big protests in the street over there around the same kind of thing. So there's a lot of momentum there. So we'll see. Next week we'll check back in with that stuff.
It does remind me what you're saying about young people. Like there was something I saw this week. I didn't put it in the news as its own thing, but like surveys have shown that millennials and Gen Z are not showing the trend of getting more conservative when they get older. What a mystery. I wonder why. And it's exactly that. Like young people are just seeing like there's nothing for me at the end of this line. So pretty related to that. Let me tell you about the UK. So There have been some pretty big strikes in the last few weeks. I mean, if you've been paying attention to the news on Red Planet, we've been covering how the RMT, big up the RMT, have been striking again and again and again. There's the CWU, that's the posties, just a bigger, like growing and very big and growing unions in the UK have been striking, and it's been causing massive disruption for the capitalist class. So obviously, they're throwing all their toys out of the pram, and because the state exists to mediate class tensions in favor of the ruling class, the UK government is now just trying to like basically ban strikes. They've introduced a bill which says the government can like set a minimum service requirement. Like, it hasn't actually set them itself in the bill. It said the government can set minimum service requirements, so that if, for example,
what that is, right? Yeah.
Exactly, right, which is the trick. So, for example, if you're talking about the RMT, they could set like a minimum service requirement for the railway that if it's less than this, then the strike is breaking the law. And obviously, like, they could set that to just be business as usual, so any strike would be illegal. But like, even if they set it to be pretty much anywhere above zero, it's like it defeats the point of a strike if kind of you have like within government like guidelines where the government has agreed that this is like an acceptable level of business, like it will be the level that's acceptable for the ruling class. So it's dog shit, basically. Mick Lynch, who's the head of the RMT, he's been speaking a lot at the Enough is Enough rallies and is a big part of Enough is Enough, has called for an emergency protest outside Downing Street and a rally of Enough is Enough. And it seems from kind of interviews that he's been doing, like he's probably gonna use that as an opportunity to say like, fuck this law, and we're just not doing it. Like more or less that the side will be like, we're just gonna keep striking because we are leveraging worker power. They are trying to push back on that. That's how this works. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in an interview, he called the new bill a nasty anti-worker bill, which is designed to repress and make very difficult our right to strike in this country. So this move might drive the UK government to open conflict with the unions, kind of unlike anything we've seen since Thatcher's union busting against the miners in the 80s. We'll see how the population moves in 2023, but as the organization name says, many people have already decided that enough is enough. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be, if it's illegal to strike and the unions are like, we're going to strike anyway, it is going to be like when the miners were striking and rioting and fighting the cops in the 80s. It's an interesting time ahead. We'll see what happens. Kira, speaking of seeing what's happening, do you have a piece of news about observing and seeing things?
Yeah. Speaking of thank you. This is fantastic. Thank you for speaking of seeing things. Amazon is now stepping up its surveillance of all of us, or at least trying to step up its surveillance of all of us by making a Ring drone. So if y'all are familiar with the Ring, chat, press 1 if you're familiar with the Ring. I think everyone is. But if you didn't know, it's a camera. I don't have one myself, but it's like a security camera you can put on like the outside of your house. And it's like, it's some people call it like a doorbell camera, but it basically can like spy on whoever like walks up to your house. I think there's other products that Ring makes, but that's the one that I'm most familiar with. And I think the one that most people are familiar with. So Ring already constitutes the largest civilian surveillance network the US has ever seen. And along with other doorbell camera brands, which the police regularly access for video recordings with and without permission of the owner, is one of the largest steps up in surveillance in history. But now, on top of that, Amazon's now introducing a new product called the Always Home Cam. Who's seen videos of this? Chat, have you seen this?
This is wild. This is like,
it is wild.
Cyberpunk shit.
It is cyberpunk. It's like literally, the game Cyberpunk 2020 sucks by many measures, although I still have played it like for 500 hours. But regardless, in that game, they have this. They have this in that game.
Exactly.
Except that in that game, it shoots you as well. But
well,
only matter of
that's
time.
probably the upgrade.
Who knows? Maybe that's next in the docket. But right now, what Amazon has created is the Always Home Cam, which is a flying little mini camera. And it's meant to patrol like rich people's houses when they're not home. Obvious implementations of this include patrolling empty properties to make sure that homeless people don't sleep in them. And capitalists are trying to market this.
That's got to be an obvious one, right? Like if someone is like, I want to keep this building empty, right? They're gonna get one of these fucking things. Like all of the ads show like middle class homes that are beautiful natural light, and oh, what if I left the stove on? But it's like, no. This is to make sure that people don't like live in a place that's empty and available to them.
Yeah. So yeah, they're trying to market as just like Sophie said, like, what if I left the stove on? What if I left the window open? Blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think the use of it is either going to be something from, personal use could be something as mundane as that to something as disgusting as, trying to prevent people from seeking housing when they're desperately in need of housing in order to maintain, an empty property in the market for money. But yeah, does anything else about this story before I move on to the next story, which is very related to that story?
It just sucks, right? I mean, one thing I would add is like, if we look at the way that the Ring doorbell has been used for surveillance so far, it's really important to not think that this is like, well, they're surveilling you, the user of the product. So that's the scary thing, because a lot of people talk about like Alexa or whatever and how it's listening in on you. And that is creepy. And that is creepy. And that is bad. And it's an entire thing to get into about like your digital double and how data is used and that kind of surveillance. But this kind of surveillance is not surveilling you, right? It is surveilling like making sure that like the property of the bourgeoisie, of the petty bourgeoisie, the illusory middle class remain with them, and making sure that other people who don't deserve it don't get to have it, right? Like I know there was like I know of a case in real life with the Ring doorbells where like, because everyone on this pretty middle class neighborhood street like has some kind of camera on the front of their house, there was something that happened in the street, and like I know from knowing people there that like the police just like had the video footage from all the cameras, like didn't have to talk to anyone, just had the footage to see what had happened immediately.
Like that's the thing, you can't trust these companies with the data or anything like that. We have a thing down here where business owners can get like kind of like grants to for security systems and stuff. And so if you try to get them for like fucking like bollards to put outside of your shops, you can't get RAM rated, you can't get them. Like they'll deny you. You won't put security cameras up, they'll do it, but it gives the cops access to the information from security cameras or whatever. But they'll apply it, they'll approve it for like thousands and thousands of dollars, and like these are lucrative contracts as well, of course, and stuff. But all of these things just add to this like increased kind of police presence and stuff. And it's just like you got to kind of think about like like even these private companies like Ring and all this kind of stuff, like what are they doing with this? What are they because it's increasing, like it's becoming more common that it's like the data and like the people around it, whatever, are as much of a product to be sold as like the product that they're actually selling. So I just would not trust any of these companies with the data.
This is probably Amazon, an important. I know we have still a little bit of news left to get through, and we want to get a guest on soon. But this is probably an important note for like how we and the Red Planet audience see news and see the political landscape around us. A lot of people think that the creepy and bad thing with surveillance is like, what if Big Brother can see you jacking off? But it's not that, right? It's not just like it's the it's if you think it's okay to be surveilled all the time, you think the person surveilling you is moral and will always do the right thing. If you ever want to get rid of that person, like the moment you decide to, you can't say because you're being surveilled all the time. You can't talk to other people about it. You can't organize. You can't do anything because you're being surveilled all the time. It's not about you living your life and they see your private moments, because ultimately we're already pretty sure that's kind of happening to us like a lot of the time. So, oh no, they saw me jacking off, but like I don't care.
But they see everyone jacking off.
Right. So it's like, okay, I'm just one of a bajillion videos of someone jacking off. But no one's
it's
gonna
like look too closely.
But it's like the they I mean, whatever. I know someone who was in the NSA and whatever. That is not the point. The point is that like point is that if you want to get rid of the fucking NSA or a government that the NSA represents and is a part of, right, the thing they're watching for is that, and you will never be able to leverage power outside of the systems that they have created that we all know don't fucking work, to change anything about politics because they're surveilling you. That's the danger of surveillance. And it's just really important for us to remember that.
I want to move on to the next story, but one more thing I want to say about this very quickly is that it's really interesting that all these products like the Ring doorbell camera or the drone are all based off of a fear of like someone taking your property, some home invasion type scenario. It's this very greedy, panicked, fear-based capitalist marketing, and it's for people's property first and foremost. I just think it's interesting. Like, what if someone steals my package? What if someone?
I just totally thought about that, because Ring had that thing, right, where it was like they had a feature that would automatically identify people that they said were like suspicious or home invaders, and it basically just started calling the cops. Then it would call the cops automatically. You can look this up. There's a thing, and it just started calling the cops on just random black people walking past houses.
What a surprise! I'm so shocked.
And I was just saying in the chat, Chloe said, this is like 1984, and I said it's like Minority Report, but it actually is. It's like those random black people just got pre-crimed,
They got
anyway.
We have more Amazon news.
Really quick. Amazon has failed its appeal to the National Labor Review Board and to refuse to recognize unionizing workers. So Amazon's trying to cry to the U.S. government, oh, please, we don't want to recognize this union, and now it has to. So the first Amazon warehouse in history unionized last year, following revelations about how awful the working conditions at Amazon warehouses are, as we've all discussed here on Red Planet, and a campaign of anti-union propaganda by the company. Amazon appealed to the National Relations Board, because they're greedy fucks and don't want to have to recognize their workers' right to organize. And on Wednesday, the NLRB official ruled that Amazon would have to recognize the union anyway. So ha 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 ha. Yeah. All right. Moving on.
Portugal. Tim, tell us about Portugal.
Okay, cool. Sorry, let's jump back over. Thousands of teachers and school staff march in Lisbon to demand higher wages. So, Portugal currently has a socialist party government, but so it's not like socialist, but it's, so it's like a center-left Keynesian party and a Keynesian party. And so, the cost of living crisis is coming up like absolutely everywhere else that we mentioned. I feel like every stream we're like, okay, so this country, they've got a cost of living crisis, and it's like every time it's a different country, and we always say, like this is a global thing. This is happening everywhere.
Gee, I wonder what that's going to lead to. Every country having a cost of living crisis.
Wow, that's so weird.
Or like every country having like terrible weather, or like rising fascism, or some kind of thing might happen. Anyway,
seems like there's a bigger picture. Maybe we'll figure it out. So thousands of teachers and school staff as well marched on Saturday, so just a couple of days ago, through the streets of Lisbon, to protest how the cost of living crisis has affected, specifically their sector. They want aside from, like kind of talking about how underpaid they are versus, the cost of living and all that kind of stuff, they wanted the Secretary of State for Education, who I'm going to pronounce the name. We've got notes here. It is João. Or João. I don't know. It's like it's /João, but anyway, Costa. Anyway, so João Costa to sit out. But the teachers in Portugal only really earn about 1,100 euros a month. But even like, the most well-paid one, it's less than 2,000 euros monthly. Yeah. So just, compared to cost of living and stuff over there, it's super, super low. And, like some of these are like people that, like one of the people in the article is like 62 years old and, has been teaching for decades sort of thing. And I mean, in general, like teachers all over the world just don't get paid enough. It's like they even, throughout all the pandemic and stuff, they're like, no, the teachers got to stay work and the teachers got to, so we don't have to deal with our shitty kids. The teachers got to babysit them and all this kind of shit. But it's like, they don't want to pay them.
Exactly. It's crazy how much specifically like neoliberal capitalism undervalues specifically reproductive labor. Like, exactly. It's one thing that like people don't receive anything for the reproductive labor they do at home, but like it's another thing altogether that like all the sectors where people have jobs doing reproductive labor, like nurses and teachers, right? Just everyone knows these people are paid like complete shit.
Anyway, we've got one more piece of news here from Brazil. So if you want to take us through that.
Sure thing. So if you remember last week, we were streaming right when a bunch of Bolsonaro supporters stormed the administrative capital of Brazil, Brasilia, and they tried to seize a few government buildings. We were getting live updates during the show. It was a pretty wild time. But basically a ton of Bolsonaro supporters went into the Brazilian Congress and a couple of other government buildings. They smashed up the place. They started a fire, and then the military showed up and started clearing them out. The military basically kind of rounded them up. It was a combination that they surrounded them, but also the insurrectionists formed a little camp where they were going to decide they were going to stay. Many have pointed out, as we did on the show, that this echoes the January 6th Trump invasion of the Capitol buildings in Washington D.C. And everything about Bolsonaro is just knock off Trump, who's already just knock off Mussolini. So good job, Jay. I wonder if he ever got out of that supermarket. Lula's government has said it was aware of plans for a protest, but the security plan was downscaled without their knowledge by pro-Bolsonaro state officials. So there is an ongoing investigation into the kind of biases that are going on within the government right now, because there are a lot of hangovers from Bolsonaro's government, and obviously they absolutely despise Lula and the prospect of socialism. But the particular sorry, go ahead. Yeah, the particular news this week is that people have been pointing out that the military actually stopped them from going in to arrest the insurrectionists, and everyone's been very clear we have to, in order to stop that from being a coup, just so it just stop that from being rampant fascism in the streets, there have to be consequences for this, which on whatever other we're going to be talking about transformative justice today, or whatever other level to do with the security of Lula not experiencing a coup probably is predicated on them arresting these people. And the military actually stopped Lula's officials when they showed up and said, you're not allowed to arrest anyone here. So yeah, and they actually slowed down Lula's officials by several hours, during which time literally hundreds of insurrectionists fled the location and have gotten away. So that's cool.
Well, and this is we talked about this last time, but this was the latest coup attempt of there's been a couple, and they've been people have been arrested for trying to plant bombs and do all this kind of shit. So it's wild that they that they, I mean, it's I was about to say that they don't take this seriously, but it's no, they do take it seriously. They just agree with them.
Exactly. Yeah, it is that. Yeah. They're not just oh, you. They're hey, my guy. That is all the news, and we did it. We got through a ton of news just in time for the guests. That's based. The thing we're discussing today could be summarized a lot of ways, and the show notes currently say, oh crap, nobody wrote this, somebody improvised. So I am now going to tell you a little bit about transformative justice. We'll probably have a little more of this discussion when the guests come on as well, because it's not that well known, and so we often end up having this discussion whenever we're talking about it, first talking about people's conceptions of what justice is. I think people are familiar with punitive justice and why it doesn't work, why having a deterrent is not actually a sound theory for stopping people doing things. In theory, most countries now practice rehabilitative justice. In theory, the prison system is supposed to have jobs programs and education and make people, upstanding members of society when they get out of prison. That's bullshit. We know that's not happening. So strike two. A lot of people in recent years have been talking about restorative justice, which is a lot more to do with people facing up with more human consequences of what they've done. Somebody's snatched your handbag or whatever, and part of the process should be that they tell you to your face that they're sorry or whatever. Which I mean, that's not, is that going to stop that happening again? Transformative justice is about changing the initial conditions that led to harm so that harm won't happen again. And so it's a lot of the focus is on like, hey, that person who snatched their handbag, why did they do that? What can we change so that they don't do it again? And we have fantastic guests from a fantastic collective called Cradle Community joining us today to talk about transformative justice and what they do to teach people about it and how to practice it. So I'd like to welcome Chelsea and Kelsey. Hello, Chelsea and Kelsey.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Going pretty good. I had a great nap today, so that's always a win. Sunday nap.
For some reason, for some psychological and neurological reason, I am incapable of napping. So I am very jealous when someone has had a good nap.
Oh, yeah.
I was just trying to wing a little introduction to do with transformative justice, but maybe you two want to tell us some more about transformative justice and then about what Cradle Community specifically does to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I can get us started. Thanks so much for having us here. And yeah, always excited to try new platforms and new things. So this is quite fun for us. Transformative justice. Hopefully we'll get more into the details and the nuances in this discussion. I guess for us, we are prison abolitionists, and we are committed to transformative justice as like a set of practices, as a ideology, as like a world view and approach to, like, not as a replacement for what we call the criminal justice system, but as a holistic approach to actually how we're going to get to the root of how harm happens in our society and our cultures, and what are the ways that we can start to prevent, minimize, and like respond to harm in ways that don't rely on us causing more harm to people in order to do that. So in the way that punishment systems rely on, okay, well, we're going to make this person suffer with this theory of like, that's going to teach them a lesson, which has never been shown to work. But actually being like, how do we get to the root of why this happened? What are the conditions under which this harm happened? And what were the choices that were made? And how can we support people to make better choices and to change the conditions that we're living in that create harm and violence, right? And we look at violence not just as that interpersonal, those interpersonal reactions, but as like a systemic thing that happens to us as well, that we're living under. So these violent structures created by the state, the violence of homelessness, the violence of borders, the violence of incarceration itself, of policing, of surveillance, these kinds of mechanisms enacted by the state. We're looking at trying to disrupt those kinds of violences, as well as responding to the interpersonal things that happen, domestic and sexual violence, and interpersonal violence as well. Chelsea, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would add, so 2 little nuggets as a criminologist. So the first thing is, anyone who studies criminal justice will tell you that the system we have doesn't work. The idea that punishing people is going to deter other people from breaking the law doesn't work. So deterrence doesn't work. The idea that we're going to separate these people from the rest of society, therefore we're going to protect society from crime because we're going to remove the criminals and then we'll eliminate crime, doesn't work, because criminality isn't like a character trait or a personality trait or a gene, right? It's a set of behaviors and choices that are then criminalized depending on who you are, where you are, and when you are, right?
Yeah.
So deterrence doesn't work, separating these people out. And then the main piece that I think everyone would agree with is rehabilitation. Well, no. The whole reason that you have to hold people accountable and, have things like laws in prisons and police, et cetera, is because, you need to give people an opportunity to reflect on what they've done and, rehabilitate to change so they won't repeat that behavior. But everyone would tell you that that's why criminal justice reform, right? That's what they're focused on. They're trying to focus on rehabilitation. Well, transformative justice is rehabilitation. It's the only form of rehabilitation that's actually works for human beings.
Yeah.
You know, is the actually getting to the why, is asking the questions and digging down, but also like Kelsey was saying, like really it's about getting into the prevention mode and thinking about why is violence something that we're just all taking for granted? Because that's what happens when we have a very reactive response to, you know, things that go wrong. It means that we're just taking it for granted that these things are going to happen and that we can't create more of a community that's safer. So that's what transformative justice is really about. It's about not only individual accountability as far as reflecting and, you know, realizing that you've harmed other people and wanting to repair that, but it's also the community and the collective responsibility to be a part of that process, but also to do the work of preventing, you know, harm from occurring in the first place and responding to it in the moment when it does. And with that, that would be a great way to talk a bit about Cradle, because that's really what drives us, is creating a world without violence. And that to us is what it means, you know, to be abolitionists. So we're a collective of, you know, organizers, you know, social workers, researchers, academics, who, you know, have came together to create spaces and help share knowledge around abolition, transformative justice, and violence prevention, you know, conflict resolution. And so we worked a lot, especially with grassroots and organizing groups that are dealing with a lot of these tensions within the organization. And, you know, they don't want to have necessarily a punitive response. They don't want to, you know, respond in the way that maybe traditional organizations would. And so that's given a lot of opportunities, you know, for us to explore what conflict resolution really can look like and how you can really address things. And it's not always pretty, which is the other thing. It's not always kumbaya and everyone holding hands. You know, that's not what resolution looks like all the time. But that's, you know, that's what we do in creating those spaces. And it's really cool.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds good. Maybe should we start off? How long have both of you guys been active with Cradle community?
So I'm one of the sort of original members. Cradle's like had a couple iterations, I guess, as we've like, it's been an ongoing experiment really.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the kind of early things that we were experimenting with was when there was the Abolitionist Futures conference in 2017. We held like the sort of social space one of the evenings, creating like a combination of like art and just like, yeah, bonding space and talking about transformative justice and creating kind of, yeah, starting to experiment with creating those kinds of spaces. And we were also working with particularly like marginalized people, particularly women and non-binary people of color who do like organizing work in like a public way. So who do like working with the Neon Spokesperson Network, if anyone's familiar with that. Like people who, yeah, kind of put themselves out there talking about really radical ideas, creating like a support space for that, because there wasn't really that much of that going on. So that was kind of like some of the early kind of iterations of working around like how we support people. And then sort of like 2018, 2019, just before the pandemic, really, we started to really get into, because lots of us have come to this work through other abolitionist organizing and feminist organizing and supporting survivors in other ways in our lives as well. We started doing that under this sort of Cradle umbrella and starting facilitating accountability processes and doing that more sort of like private work in supporting our communities and starting to skill share these tools around bystander intervention, de-escalation skills, supporting people through mental health crises and these kinds of things. And it's around then, I think, that Chelsea got involved, right? Before we started writing the book as well.
Yeah, amazing. That's cool.
Yeah, so I joined Cradle and got involved with Cradle in 2019. So I actually moved to the UK in the fall of 2018. And one of the first like one of the only events on Oxford campus that had anything to do with abolition in the title. I went to it and I met Kelsey there, and they were on the panel, and we actually connected without speaking, like during the panel, because someone on the panel kept like speaking over them and like waving their hand in their face. And she and I just made eye contact, and we were kind of just like, this guy, you know? And so afterwards I went up to her and, you know, I started talking. She was like, you're American. I'm like, yeah, you know? And so we started chatting, and she invited me to these really cool events Cradle was doing at the time, which we were excited to bring back since we were coming out of the pandemic, Freedom Fighters Feasts, which are really amazing. Usually the food is vegan but delicious. And
vegan but delicious.
Well, you know, because I'm just being real. I love all types of food. So for me, it's always a pleasant surprise to eat delicious vegan food. Not that it doesn't exist, but just that it's a pleasant surprise. So yeah, but it meant that the food was, you know, everyone could eat the food. It was delicious. You know, we had great conversations, being able to meet people from all over London who were working in really different types of organizing. You know, people were in healthcare and housing, you know, and social care, you know, just people who are doing all types of cool stuff. And you know, the members of Cradle sussed me out for a couple of months, you know, and, you know, at one point we're like, hey, do you want to join the collective? And I was pumped because for me, coming from the US, I was also involved in organizing where I'm from in Atlanta, and involved in Black Lives Matter, and, you know, responding to police brutality in Atlanta, Georgia, and had done some organizing in DC as well, and had connections, you know, across. So when I moved here, it was really important to me to kind of get locked into a community and really start giving back. And that's what I feel like Cradle's been able to do. I mean, we do everything from like mutual aid on our social media to, you know, just creating, you know, solidarity, just creating resources, working with university students, you know, to respond to things happening on campus. So it's really cool the work we do, and I'm so grateful to be a part of the collective.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I've noticed that you both mentioned, so, you know, like putting on these events with like food, and then Kelsey, earlier you mentioned like there's something to do with like art and things like that. Do you find that that is like, you know, is that like a core part of like what you're trying to do? Like, you know, kind of like, I guess, nurture the community through like, through these like kind of like more social kind of events? Is that kind of, is that a big thing for you guys?
Absolutely. I think like sharing food, being like comfortable, having like really like warm vibes is like really cool to what we do, because we're like talking about really like heavy stuff sometimes, and we really want to like create space for that to happen in a way that's like, doesn't feel harmful to people. And we want to like also create spaces so that when we're not talking about heavy stuff, we can just like, you know, have our needs met and like be, you know, like when we're meeting in the evenings, it's so easy to let those things slide. Like, oh, okay, so you're going to come straight from work, you're going to go to a meeting from 7 till 9. And then when are you going to have dinner, right? And like all we've done is munch some like Oreos that were like shared between 12 people. And actually like, because that's a go-to vegan snack. But I think it's, whereas with the Freedom Fighters Feast, like, I guess like, to be honest, it's a bit of a rip-off from something that I attended when I went and spent a bit of time in the Bay Area, in California, where the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, before the pandemic, they were doing these monthly potluck dinners where they would meet in this massive hall, and there would be like, everyone would bring food and you would have dinner, but you'd be like at these tables, and there would be all the like transformative justice principles and practices and values stuck up on the wall on like flip chart around you for you to just sort of like absorb by osmosis or whatever. And then like Mia Mingus, who leads the collective and is an incredible transformative justice practitioner. She would, just give like TJ-based prompts. And then you would like discuss those over dinner, and it would just be like not necessarily like these like high level kind of theoretical things, but like actual genuine things to discuss with people about your experiences. So like, how have you built trust in your life? Like these kinds of questions about what does it look like to repair trust in your life? Like, how do we share these experiences of like these relational dynamics that we've all experienced, and how do we sort of just like create space to explore those and discuss those? And so so basically kind of brought that idea back to London and started the Freedom Fighters Feast, and really focused it around like creating a space also only for Black people and people of color, kind of creating that space for us to really just bond and like feel good, and also like learn from each other, and that's been creating those kinds of really comfortable vibes and spaces. It's like I'm obsessed with half the time when we advise people also, and they'll be like, oh, like how do we have this conversation, or how do we start conversations about transformative justice in our community or whatever, I'm just like, have a dinner. That's like basically my go-to advice for like all things. I'm just like, have a dinner, discuss it over food. Like, you bring food, people will come because they're hungry. Sure. People will keep coming to your events if they know the food is good. If there's like, it's the same with community engagement stuff. If you have a stall that's got the good donuts, people will keep coming back every week, right? Like, you gotta know like these little things that like make people feel like, oh, there's something a bit like special and just lovely about this.
No, it's awesome. I also love the thing about you ripping off this idea where it's like, that's like that's what we want, right? Like this kind of like cross-pollination of ideas, like learning from other orgs and being like, wow, this is a really powerful thing that they're doing, we should do that as well. Because it's kind of like, like there's no reason that another org should get upset about you for like, like cribbing their tactics or anything like that. If it's like, if you both have common, like if you're both on the same team, it's like, man, everyone in the world should be doing this.
Our missions are aligned. We want this work to be iterative. In no way do I ever want Cradle to be the person that owns these kinds of practices, these kinds of things either, right? Like, so take them on, do your own dinners. I think Mia Mingus would definitely agree.
We're saying the same thing about Red Planet quite frequently, that like if people think that anything could be done better about like interviewing orgs and activists, then they should do it, because we want as many people as possible to do the same thing. I'm quite curious what you're saying about Mia Mingus being a transformative justice practitioner, because I believe what you do with Cradle is a lot of education and showing people how they can practice transformative justice. But is Mia working as a practitioner a different thing? And if so, like what is it that Mia does?
That's a really great question. I think like, so we are also like, I guess we fall under the umbrella of like practitioners as well, but we really like insist on only kind of doing that work within our own community, right? And so not becoming like a service model where sometimes by labeling yourself as a practitioner, it's like, okay, so now you're the people that people called in order to facilitate the process for them. But really, we're really about like, we're experimenting with this and trying to do it in our own community. We're talking to other people who are doing that too. Here's the skills that we're learning from doing that work, and the skills that we're pulling from like other sectors and things like as well. There's like a lot of great work that has been done with survivors within other problematic sectors, right? The DV sector and the sexual violence sector. And skill sharing those within other communities in order for them to like take these on and for it to be iterative. I think what Mia Mingus does as well is probably quite similar, but what she's also done is like, I guess, created these really amazing tools that have become quite widespread. So I think she, like, her and the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, like, they originated the pod mapping tool that a lot of different groups use. and have done some really great sort of experimental work as well, like this apology lab where I think over like several weeks people came back to like work through like their own like thoughts about apologies and what kinds of apologies work and models for how, and like that internal work of like, who is it that I need to apologize to and I haven't, and like what's holding me back from doing that and what could that look like, and doing, you know, kind of doing that over multiple weeks. And yeah, I know they've done a lot of that kind of work, which I think being able to see that from afar and see the like work that comes out of it, the resources that comes out of it, is like incredibly helpful for us as well, who are like a bit younger and doing this, you know.
One of the things I really like about transformative justice is how it really clearly demolishes that false dichotomy that is often imposed in a lot of our like political praxis. For instance, like, or take anything political. You see a lot of people espousing certain values with their mouths, right? They'll say that they have these values, but then when it comes into like day-to-day practice, they won't implement them. It'll be more one of those like, you know, like, oh no, I'm waiting for the revolution, or I'm waiting for something to happen, you know?
You mean like how people, like, everyone's like ACAB, fuck cops and stuff like that, but then they're like a super punitive when it comes down to like,
exactly.
you know,
Precisely.
like
absolutely
instances of harm in their own community.
So one of the things I like about transformative justice, to me, is that it very clearly just like demolishes that dichotomy, or makes a mockery of it. It's like, it seems it very obviously can be implemented in our day to day. So not just on like, you know, not just when we're trying to replace prisons, but like just in the way that we interact with each other. So I was just wondering if y'all had any sort of like really significant ways that transformative justice has influenced your personal dealings with people, like when building just community on, you know, just interacting with people, keeping your organization, you know, together. If there's any specific kind of like significant personal things y'all have taken from this.
Maybe I'll lead with an example, right? And I'll lead with an organizer someone that I organized with in Atlanta. And while we were working, we were actually out at a rally. So we did a sleep out. So essentially we spent overnight in front of a courthouse in order to influence an attorney to prosecute a police officer that murdered someone. And when we got back to his apartment had gotten robbed. Someone had stole his television and like his stereo system. And I remember going into the apartment with him, and he saw that, you know, the stuff was taken. And he just sat down on the couch and he took a deep breath and he was like, okay, all right. And I could tell that he was angry, he was upset. And I was like, yo, what do you want to do? Because obviously, you know, we're not going to call the police. We don't, you know, we were just protesting the police killing someone. So
right.
And then we come home to the situation of like the same thing that I think right wingers ask us all the time. Well, who are you going to call when you get robbed? Like, this was that exact situation. I'm sitting here next to my friend and I can tell that he's upset, you know, and after a few minutes, he was just like, they needed it more than I did because I can get another one. And I'm like, bro, do you like want to get in your car, like ride around? Like it's a big screen. You could probably find the part. Like they got to be carrying it somewhere. Like, nah. I'm like, so for me, I will be honest. I think a lot of people think all abolitionists are like kumbaya and we're all like, you know, the Dalai Lama, and we've all just risen above the human instincts of anger. And like, no, bro, like I still believe in street justice to some extent. Okay. But my friend, he really modeled for me what that response looked like, because he chose to live in a community that's impoverished. Yes, he lives in a nicer apartment than most of the people around. He has higher tech, you know, like than most of the people around. So a part of it was him acknowledging in that moment that like, hey, there is someone who's doing the calculations of I can break into this place when no one's there and take this equipment. And like our viewpoint is that property is not more important than people. So it's like when you have to apply that in your real life, that's when you realize what these things actually mean. You know what I'm saying? You realize that a television is not that important. So imagine somebody risking their life, risking going to prison and all that behind a television, how much they're going to get for that at like a pawn shop or trade that in. Less than $300, less than $500. So imagine what type of situation you have to be in to do something that wild to get like $500. Do you see what I'm saying? When you can pause right there instead of just being like, oh, you know, it's this horrible thief who came and stole from us, right? So immediately labeling them or recognizing, yo, this is a person. So fast forward a few years later, when I first moved to the UK, while I was actually home, someone broke into a house I was living in. I lived on the top floor though. The house I was living in, and stole one of my roommates' engagement ring.
Oh wow.
And the whole situation was so interesting because I tried to convince her not to call the police, and I'm like, yo, you're gonna call the police and they're not gonna do anything. No, they're not gonna get your ring back, you know, so all it's gonna do is like cause hoopla. But she really disagreed with me. She wanted to call the police, so she called them. They came. They then spent 30 minutes interrogating my boyfriend, who's also Black, who was not there, obviously, at the time of the robbery, because it happened multiple hours before. But the police came in and just saw a Black dude and was like, hey, yeah, so there's something missing. We're going to need to
pat
you down.
This is such a common story.
So that happened in real life. Like it happened when I told her. And, you know, fast forward, we asked the cops, did you go across the street and get the surveillance footage from the cafe? No. Did you go next door to, there's a restaurant next door that also
they don't care.
Check their footage. No. Did you do anything? Really? No, they just wrote a report and interrogated my boyfriend. So
yeah,
the truth is that a lot of times when things do happen and go wrong, you realize that relying on the systems that be doesn't often actually solve the problem anyway. So for me in real life, it's been able to kind of put the pieces together for someone who's so upset. So my roommate at that point, she was so upset. Why did they check the cameras? Why aren't they trying to get my ring back? And I'm like, girl, that's not what the police are here for.
Yeah, that's not their job.
They're here to protect your personal property. But when we say they protect property, that's writ large. They're not, you know, it's not your personal property that they're going to go out of their way to recover. So it's like bringing people out of the fantasy world of what they think police do and what that does. And those two real situations of it impacted my life and having to deal with it and manage that, because that happens to real people every day. Most people who get robbed never get the stuff back that was recovered, whether they call the police and police get involved or not. So how do we as a community then rally around someone who got robbed? So everyone in our house put together a bit of money, you know, for her to get a replacement ring. So it's like we as a community responded. The cops didn't help her get restitution or whatever. We as her roommates helped her. And that's what community looks like in real life.
That your story really reminded me of like, fairly often in London, there are people who are like, they just need a very small amount of money, but they're kind of running like a little gambit to try and get it or whatever. And whenever this happens, I'm just like I want them to have the money. Like it was a time when this woman came up to me and she had a really long kind of immediately transparent story about being like in town from out of town, and she needed the blah 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 and it was like at the end of the day she was ultimately trying to get like £30 off me. And I was just like, obviously you can just have this. Like, I didn't say this to her. I like kind of would have been a very strange situation to do that. But like, you know, it was immediately what I was thinking was just like, if you're doing all of this rigmarole to get like such a small amount, you know, was what it reminded me of. But I just wanted to say also, like, I think that one thing transformative justice does for like both sides of someone getting harmed is like, the ideal situation is like everyone is trying to help to make the situation better, right? Like if there was someone like you were saying about like rallying around your roommate and helping her, like in an ideal world there would also be people who are rallying around like trying to help the like you were saying about like for such a small amount, like trying to help them and change that. And I think that's something that really shift people's perspective when they engage with transformative justice, is because like if accountability for doing something wrong means punishment, people will just want to avoid that. Like they will just so they're like the side of the person who's done harm, as it were, is all about denying harm has happened if there's only punishment for it, right? But if the side can be like helping that person to not do that harm again, changing things to make it better, then it's a way more productive and like also just like honest side, right? Kelsey, did you want to talk about like kind of real life stuff or?
Yeah, and thank you, Chelsea, for those examples as well. I think they really like encapsulate like so much. And I guess I want to just add like the thing that brought me to transformative justice was experience of sexual violence. And I'm not gonna like obviously go into detail of that, but it was upon like then like living through like the impacts of that, and then also like learning more about like gender-based violence and like patriarchal systems, and understanding like, oh wait, like lots of the people who have gone through these things also look like me or have these certain things in common with me. And there's like, you know, understanding these things not as like a personal failing, but as a like system that creates this kind of harm on like such a regular basis. And realizing like, you know, like I wasn't going to go to the police in that situation because of so many things that really I didn't have compassion for the person who harmed me. It wasn't about that at all. It was much more about the shame around it. It was about like the process of that and the fear of how the police were going to talk to me. What if it did go to court, and the whole trauma, like re-traumatizing effect of all of that, having to keep talking about it to these strangers in this kind of public way, to be picked apart, the fear of all of those things, the fear of having to talk to my parents about it, right? Like the fact that I didn't already have like a support network, which is what like that could identify that kind of harm, that could talk about it, that meant that I was vulnerable to it, right? And understanding like all of these things going on at once, and like realizing like so many of us like aren't even using that system that's supposedly there for keeping us safe. That system was nowhere near me when that was happening. That system was not involved, right? And like there was no way the police were going to come and intervene in that. And that's not how it works with police and sexual violence. The vast majority of the time, if people do, which most people don't, if people do go and report it, it's like an average time of like a year after the incident anyway, right? Like it's not in any way an intervention. And so in thinking about how we actually disrupt these patterns of sexual violence, of understanding the like violent systems that I like grew up under as well, and like why I was incapable of advocating for myself, incapable of being able to identify what was going on in my own body and where those boundaries were and how to articulate them. All of those systems, that's what brought me to transformative justice, because it was like, this was not just about an individual thing that happened between two people. This is something like so much bigger than that. And in order to actually be like, you know what, I don't want this to be an inevitability, putting that one person behind bars also wouldn't ever mean that that wouldn't happen to me again, right? That's the reality of this kind of violence, right? Because it's so pervasive. And so actually, if I want to support young people to not grow up with this as an inevitability, if I want to like change this generational understanding that actually like we just keep certain people like scared because of this inevitable idea of violence that might happen to them. We tell young people like not to go out at night or not to go certain places or not to do certain things because that makes them vulnerable to violence. Actually, I want to disrupt the cause of that violence, right? I want to make it so that our world is safer for all of us, and that if this does happen, because I appreciate people are always going to do fucked up things. I don't know if we ever will get to a place where like all violence is ended, right? But we can stop creating so many circumstances where people like are not able to speak about it, where people have no support for it, and that there's no like response that will actually mean that that person won't go through that again. Like, it's really through like that experience and speaking to so many other survivors, it's been like, okay, so it's so much more than just about punishing this one person, but it's like, okay, so if your feeling of safety has been compromised when you leave the house, what can we do to make you feel safe so you can get to work on time and not be late all the time, because now it's having knock-on impacts for you in other ways? What are the ways that we can make sure that you still experience joy and that you still have access to healing, that you have access to community, all of these things? Like, how do we actually like create all of these other avenues for support that the criminal justice system is not concerned with at all, right? So that stuff like is really everyday for me. And I think like sometimes we talk about that as like this kind of like, yeah, far away stuff, but like that stuff is every day, and it's something that we can start to intervene on. And I think about it every time I go to the bar or to the pub, or if I'm out or whatever, right? It's like, how can we start to intervene in these small ways to like disrupt these dynamics, to stop things like sexual harassment on public transport, from racist harassment and abuse that's happening in public space? How can we start like, disrupting these kinds of everyday violences in those ways, as part of understanding that's part of that entire cultural shift that we need?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. What you were saying there about like these, I think it's definitely something that I have thought a lot more about since like learning more about like abolition stuff and like transformative justice, like just these like little interactions just in our day-to-day life, where it's like it doesn't need to always be like the big thing where you're having like like a giant like like an intervention around someone who has done serious harm, where it's like if everyone is educated on these kind of things, like all these little interventions could be like like this could be the one moment that stops something from happening down the line, like it's definitely something that I always try and be conscious of, and it's definitely something that I experience like in like typically more masculine spaces. I've talked about this on stream before, in places like barbershops and like tattoo shops and stuff like that, where it's like you do see dudes saying things or like doing things or whatever like that, and like I've tried to become the guy that is like, hey, like like let's talk about what you're saying or what you just did here a little bit, and I think like, I mean, this is another thing we've talked about before, and I think like being like a dude with like a beard and tattoos lends me like it's like it's shitty, but it's like dudes will listen to me about that, like we've talked about it before, like I think last stream we were talking about it, because I don't have like blue hair or something like that. They're like, oh shit, like this is a dude is telling me, oh okay, I better listen, which fucking sucks. But like I feel like like if you're listening and you are like a dude that kind of conforms to kind of like, I guess, like generic masculine stereotypes, there is like a kind of responsibility when you start learning about this shit like that. There's like like you kind of have to step up a little bit to to really be the guy that speaks out.
And can I say, yes, absolutely, it's your superpower, right? I have a lot of they say rest in bitch face. I know a lot of guys that rest in douche face. Like they just sit there and they look like you're an asshole. They just look like that, That is a superpower, because it means you can be in conversations that they would never have around me. Look at me. You would never say those things while I'm sitting there, right? Yeah. But you're there, right? And so one, that's a superpower, because you're basically have a cloak of invisibility on, because you're in the room and you're able to disrupt that. But the other thing, Tim, that you were saying that where you said it's terrible that these people would feel more comfortable with me saying it to someone else. That's not terrible, and I'll tell you why. When you're in community with someone, it's a lot easier to hear something from them than from a stranger. Things that my boss said to me at work, my partner telling me the same thing at home, I received it real different. Because I'm in love with you. I care about you. You built something. Like, I trust you. You know what I'm saying? You know me. So I feel like you're probably more accurate. This lady doesn't really know me that much. I see her a few hours a day. I don't know about her. But now I trust what you're saying, right? But it has that knock-on effect. So I think the truth is we have to recognize community is such an important part of transformative justice. Well, and I think one of the main ways that we mess up is we try and hold people accountable that we're not in community with.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm reaching all the way over here to try to hold you accountable, and I'm not in community with you.
Yeah.
Why? Why am I doing that? It's not going to bode well. Why? Because I'm going to be pissed off, and you're probably going to be pissed off, which is going to escalate the situation. So I think about this on social media in a really basic way. This is why typically I don't comment on like what celebrities do. Oh, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. We're all the anti-violence people. Where y'all at? Like, I'm not in community with Will Smith. If it was my homeboy, I would have called him, right?
Yeah.
We would have had a chat, but we're not friends. So, you know what I'm saying? The reality of holding people accountable is a lot of times you have to be in community with that person. And a lot of times when we see a lack of accountability is because the people around that person are turning a blind eye. The people around that person are in denial. The people, oh no, they can never do that. No, you know your friend. You know your friend that's always grabbing up girls when y'all go out every week. You know your friend. Don't act like you surprised when he goes a little too far. You know your friend. So you know what I'm saying? You're accountable too. You hang out with that person. You're in community with them. So it's on you as well to call it out, to say something to them. And everyone's responsible for themselves. So no, it's not saying you're responsible for them, but yes, you are responsible. If you're hanging out with somebody, you guys go out every weekend, and you know,
there's like an accountability.
Replicate every club you go to. Yeah, you're responsible for that because you're rolling with it.
This feels really opposite of what I've observed and also what I do, which is this. I really appreciate you saying this, because it's so much easier to criticize someone that you're not in community with. It's much more difficult, at least in my opinion, to criticize your friends. And I see that kind of like that division a lot, like in social media, but also just personally, like people, one of your friends does something shitty. What do? Do you call them out on it? Well, most people I think don't, because they want to maintain that comfortable friendship. And so they will justify what they said, or they will, they'll find a way to erase what they said or whatever. And in the meantime, they're much more willing to call out someone that they know they have no stake with, they have no relationship with, because there's nothing to lose then. I really appreciate you saying this, because I think a lot of us need, including myself, need to hear this big time.
I just think a lot of the time, people, maybe are more comfortable when they have that distance to like throw out like a whole load of feedback, a 20 tweet thread or whatever, and then they'll go and have their Christmas dinner with their racist auntie or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, are you having those conversations actually in your like social and familial circles? And are you doing that deep work with people? Because actually, like, that stuff also takes a long time. It won't take just shouting at your friend one time, actually, to like, you'll intervene, you might cut them off, you might stop them. We want to intervene on like immediate harm that they might be causing if you're out and stuff, right? But it's going to be multiple conversations, and it's going to be because like, we've touched on these ideas, I think, of like community accountability and self-accountability, and the ways that like we are accountable as a community, because if we're not like calling each other out in some way, or we're not like trying to actually like hold each other to the principles and values that we've agreed within a group, and we're not setting that standard for each other, then we're like okaying worse and worse behavior, right?
Just acting like a mob, essentially.
Exactly. But real change like has to also come from someone holding themselves to account, right? And so we need to like enable the conditions for that. You want to have people who are setting like good standards and are like, like there's social consequences if you don't do this. But like in the end, like you have to do it, right? You can't actually, then the system won't be, oh, every time I go out, I know that if I'm about to harass someone, my friend will karate chop me out the way. Like that's also not the system that we're like gonna long term be like, well, it's fine because I know that they'll stay sober while I get wasted and do these things, right? Like that's not what we're trying to create, but because then we're just policing each other, right? But we have to really do that internal work and support each other to be like, like what is behind this behavior? Why are you struggling with boundaries in this way? And what are the things that we can like keep doing to like actually make you understand the like impacts of how you're making people feel and make you care about that. But like in the end, people are gonna have to, that's gonna have to come from themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cause like to return to Tim's example, like the you know, guys saying, say, misogynistic things because they're only around like some other guys, like isn't just a behavior that is making it a hostile space to women. It's making it a hostile space, like hypothetically, to any man who would like stand up against that. And it's like, well, something I like about transformative justice, like especially compared to punitive justice, is that punitive justice keeps on going back to an idea of some kind of like criminal essence, like something in people that makes people do bad things, some kind of like human nature bullshit. And like I think that transformative justice like takes, like, it's not in here, it's out here. Like people do stuff because there's situations around them, and we have to change like the situation around them. And well, like
also, if I could jump in there, Sophie, I think it's so important to say that every human person has the capability to cause harm.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
Nobody's exempt. So that means you could be the victim, you could be the perpetrator. Guess what? It could be you. It could be me. So when you really sink that in, that's why the whole idea of victim perpetrator falls apart, right? Because most perpetrators have also been victims. And most victims will go on to perpetrate, right? So the reality is when we get down to the crux of all of us can harm each other and all of us can be harmed. Whoa, that means we're all really vulnerable. And we all have to be on guard to make sure we're not harming each other. That's when that accountability has to click in, right? Because now I'm on guard to make sure other people not being harmed around me and that I'm not the one doing the harming. So again, it causes us to, is no longer label people you can label over there. Oh, those people are racist. Those people are racist. Those guys are rapists. Nah, it might be your homeboy. It might be your auntie. It might be your mom. It might be you. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You can't just label people as something now. Now you have to really unpack.
What does that mean? To, like,
that's harmful. And how is that being perpetrated? Now, once we're talking about behaviors, now the ground shifts. And the reason I love it is because there's no double standards. I can have one standard for a cop and another standard for me. Oh no, it's fine for me to go upside your head, but I don't think a police officer should go upside your head.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I want to respect your human rights. I should respect them too, right? So it's that also thing. I respect bodily autonomy. I respect all your crevices, you know, that no one should enter them without your consent. So when the state does that, when you're arrested or you go into intake, I feel like that's a violation of human beings that should not happen on this planet, right? So then how are people in the club putting their finger? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So these are the types of things where we have to be consistent in terms of how we respect each other. And that's what transformative justice calls us to do.
Absolutely. I think that, like, I guess a way that I've been framing it to some people recently is I don't believe in like fundamental human nature, like a deep down thing. I believe in like fundamental human tendency. Like people have a ceiling over their heads all the time. And when it's like pushed down really low, like they have like less space to move, and there's only so many things they can kind of do. And like that language about like capabilities, like we have the capability to be harmed, we have the capability to do harm, is what I'm talking about. Like we don't have like an essence that's being this way, right? Because also like when people talk about human nature, they're being like, we're all ready to like stab each other in the back. And then if you look at communities who are poorer, because they're poorer, that human nature is going to come out more or whatever. Like that's the language that they are using to like do racism with extra steps or whatever. But like it's actually like, well, no, being poorer means that like the ceiling is down here, you know, and your choices are fewer and worse choices, you know. And I like what I was trying to say about Tim's example was just like, if Tim says like that's not on and here's why, like the ceiling it kind of is raised up, like the different possibilities in that space for all of the guys then include saying, I don't think it's okay for you to like talk this way about women, act this way towards women or whatever. Like the
whole like I think like the what you were saying about like the racism with extra steps, that's like something that we saw like back when I was growing up. I talked about this a little bit on stream before, but it was in the news in like this like in the 90s and the early 2000s over here. Actually, I think even like later than that, maybe. Yeah. But
is this the warrior gene shit?
Yeah. So there was like this whole thing, and it was kind of like, why are Maori and Pacifica people more predisposed to crime? Which is like, even the way that they frame it, like, why are they predisposed to crime? And it's like, you know, when you look at like poverty and all these kind of things like that, it's like, you know, like, surely that couldn't be the problem. So instead, like, a bunch of scientists down in Wellington did the study and came up with like the warrior gene. And it was like this one gene that like a lot of, like that I think most kind of Polynesian people have in common. It's like, was it monoamine oxidase A? And they were like, this is the warrior gene. This is you know, like, it has a thing to do with like behavioral aggression following provocation and all this kind of stuff like that. And it like was almost immediately thrown out by like other scientists who, you know, were smarter, but it like has persisted in this kind of like cultural kind of discourse, whereas like even today people will be like, you know, like you see like cops talking about it and shit like that, you know. And it's like this like wild thing where it's like there's a much simpler solution to this, you know. And it's just that, like, you know, like there are far more Maori and Pacifica people living in poverty, and, you know, when they're in poverty, the ceiling's lower. Like, it's the exact same thing. But it's like, it's coming back to this thing where it's like they're trying to say it's not community, it's something ingrained in you, and that your community needs to be policed more, or like,
exactly.
Sorry, Kelsey, you were going to say something.
Sorry for interrupting. I think just, it's these narratives around criminality just never really allow for, maybe just people are responding to their environment. Maybe they're responding to like the conditions that they're under and the choices that they're given, right? And I just think like, the one sort of thing that we haven't like specifically named, although we've talked around it, I think when thinking about this stuff is power, right? And that so much harm is enabled because people are like in these positions of power, whether that's officially in institutions or whether that's socially, right? And it's understanding like in that, like, it's not just that someone has to like have the upper hand in order to be violent to someone, but it's just that they are much more likely to feel able to cause violence or to oppress someone else or whatever if they
like they have like a form of leverage, right? Like,
they have leverage. So if they know that person's not going to be listened to if they go to the police about me, like who's going to be, you know, like they're much more able to like abuse that person, for example. But also I guess just then in thinking about, what was I going to say? Oh, well, just that like really core to transformative justice is that disruption of power dynamics, and really critically looking at the way that within almost every structure that has like a hierarchy, you find abuses of power, basically, whether that's within workplaces, within hospitality industry, within boardrooms, within government, within religious institutions, or the family, right, as well. Like when we have these things that mean that actually we are loyal to the person at the top and maintaining their reputation and their
like
power,
swearing fealty to the father or some shit,
whether that's the patriarch or the boss or whoever, it means that then there's people who are silenced below, right? And so really trying to find ways that we actually disrupt those power dynamics. And so when we talk about accountability, and what we're often talking about is redistributing those power structures, right? So it's not a punishment for someone who's abusing their power to be removed from that position of power. It doesn't mean they're going into prison, right? But it doesn't mean that they then continue on in that same position. And there can be a kind of idea, right, with like, you know, these like very high-powered people who have caused a lot of harm and violence, that, oh, let's just get a TJ practitioner in to just facilitate, and they'll just reflect on their behavior and then they'll just carry on. And it's like, no, they will not be the CEO anymore. accountability process, right? They will surrender that power and it will be removed. And so it's so much about disrupting these power dynamics, because you can't have accountability in these current systems, right? There's no accountability for what happened at Grenfell, right? Because it's just like some bureaucrat signing off a bit of paper and doing these things. So it just gets so watered down that like no one's personally responsible, right? But actually like that was violent. And so really thinking about power as like a key.
I'm not meaning to undercut the point, which I agree with entirely, but the number of MPs who are themselves landlords has increased since Grenfell. And I think that those people specifically redacted. Please carry on, Kelsey. I'm
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely are individuals that could be held to account around those decisions. So I guess just thinking about like state violence in the way that it's like, you know, that you don't have to go and like stab a person, and because they would never do that, right? They're not violent, but actually like they're incredibly violent by the policies that they make and these kinds of things. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to make that.
No, that's like a thing that we talk about a lot down here in regards to you know, I guess like the violence that like colonization has kind of imparted upon Maori is like this you know, like when you talk about that, a lot of people think of like, oh, you know, like the direct violence of, you know, like of colonization, like the legitimate like kind of boots on the ground, you know, like burning down villages and stuff like that. But then there's like, you know, like this everyday violence that, you know, like has just a high death toll of like, you know, like kind of like discrimination in like, you know, everything from like healthcare and hospitals to like housing and all these kind of things, where it's like these things end up in harm. Like, you know, like this is violence. Like it leads to, you know, it leads to people getting sick, people getting hurt, people dying and stuff. And like, this is just another form of violence. It's kind of like the, you know, what do they call it? Like the subtle knife, you know, as opposed to like, you know, like a direct, you know, like in a direct attack. Whatever.
Sometimes I feel like Tim makes Dune references and then checks my camera to see if I
oh really? No, I didn't even think about that as a Dune reference until you said it. I was like, oh shit, that's a Dune reference.
Okay.
But no,
Good
thing. But yeah, you know, like thinking of violence as like this bigger picture violence, like this thing that affects communities, as opposed to, you know, just like some dude punching another dude or whatever. There's like a kind of like, there's like this whole thing with like traditional like Maori kind of the approach to justice and stuff, which is very like you know, like I guess like it's very like kind of like restorative or transformative kind of justice. Like it's not, I wouldn't say it was like either in one camp or the other, but it kind of floats between them. That a lot of like there's been a lot of like academics that have kind of looked into it, and there's been a couple of really amazing Maori academics that have written extensively about like kind of getting solidarity between kind of like modern, I'd say transformative and restorative justice practices, and, you know, like the traditional, what we call kaupapa Māori kind of like, you know, practices or whatever. Some of them in particular we've talked about before on stream, like Matua Moana Jackson, who just passed away last year. Amazing man. Who, yeah, he was a treaty lawyer that kind of talked about, like this kind of stuff, like that kind of like he was like a staunch abolitionist, had a lot to do with, I mean, there's like some people that we're going to probably have on the stream sometime soon. I won't go too far into that, but with like groups like People Against Prisons Aotearoa and stuff like that, and talking about how it's like not just, you know, like there's like this kind of like liberal idea of like, you know, like colonization and what it did to us Maori, like, you know, the dispossession of land. But then there's like people thinking like, oh, we solve this by, you know, like, I guess like thriving in the existing system. Whereas like he was more like, no, we need to look at the existing system and how that is harming us and how that, you know, perpetuates harm and stuff. So you know, it's like I find it really interesting when it's like people all around the world are kind of you know, talking about like kind of community justice and stuff, and it all comes back to these same kind of things, you know. And it's like all these people all over the world have develop these different systems, and it's like, man, like there's like one thing we can, you know, that we all have in common that we learn from, and this works in all these different situations. But then you know, but I guess like, you know, like no one even like then, you know, like all these like governments and these states around the world are just like, I wonder if there's anything we could learn from that. No.
I feel like on the history of it, Graeber says in Debt, the First 5,000 Years, that like punitive justice has a lot to do with the history of debt. Like the oldest legal code, like Hammurabi, right, is like an eye for an eye, because it's an idea of like a debt that has to be paid off. And like that's not how human beings actually normally work. Like the whole system of debt and credit is like mediating unknowns or whatever. And like you, just like you said, like people, human beings come to the same conclusions, and then capital has a very different idea.
Human beings working in community with each other, kind of.
Yeah.
So,
and, yeah.
I would just agree that absolutely that a lot of the concepts are based on so many Indigenous and First Nations communities and shared by those communities, but also the fact that prisons have not always been a thing. And so humans had to respond to harm and violence and problems and community conflict, and all the types of violence, you know, aside from like social media bullying, they didn't have to respond to that. But, you know, all of these other types of violence they had to respond to before prisons were ever kind of invented or thought of. And that the state, even the idea of like the modern state, is a European invention that came out of war, Treaty of Westphalia. So all of these things that our society is based on are actually very violent concepts.
Yeah. 100%.
The state is based on who has a monopoly of violence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In a set amount of space, right? Prison is based on the state's ability to enact violence against you. The death penalty is our right to murder you, right? Our right to arrest you is our right to kidnap you. Our right to kidnap your children and put them in state care. So all of these types of violence, the state, which is based on violence, says, hey, I can enact all these types of violence on you. And so the truth is, when we really look at violence, like you all said, it's all around us in our society. And that's what we're disrupting really with abolition. I think we want to really share that piece about joy as well and community. And that's why I so love what your point, Tim, as well, when you're talking about the connections as far as in the Maori community, as far as connections to more traditional values around not just, you know, how we respond to harm and punishment, as far as decolonizing in terms of, you know, returning to language and these type of things, but also in terms of our day-to-day lives, how we live, how we interact with nature, how we treat each other, how we raise our children. You know, all of those things is being influenced by these violent ideas. And for us, we're really excited about exploring, you know, what those new, and sometimes recovering those old ideas as well. And that's the actual, if I could do a shameless plug, the title of the book, Brick by Brick, came from.
Oh yeah, cool.
How we build a world without prisons, because it's recognizing that we have to tear down bricks. So yes, we have to destroy things and eliminate things, but really the more important and more exciting part is the building, is the creation, and all of the things that we have to do as a society and transform in order to live in a world that doesn't have prisons.
Yeah, that's what you were saying, you know, about like, you know, the cultures existing without prisons and stuff, I think is really like that's something that who I was just talking about, Moana Jackson, that was like a core part of what he talked about. And he, you know, like this idea that like societies had been doing this for a long time, and that, you know, we didn't need that. And like, yeah, one thing that really struck me when I was younger, when I first became familiar with his work, was like he had said, you know, there's like nothing in the Treaty of Waitangi that allows the kind of, you know, settler government to imprison or, you know, take the child of a Maori person or whatever like that. And that, you know, I was like, oh shit, like he's right, like they, you know, like built the state and then they kind of just whatever. But no, but I think like the way that these kind of justice, these traditional justice systems popped up is really interesting to me, because for us it was kind of like you know, like it differed from you know, there was like the Polynesian settlers that came to New Zealand and became Maori, and kind of spread out and developed these little communities groups. We call them, there's like tribes, iwi, and then there's like hapu, which is like the sub-tribe that everyone lived in. And so it was like, if someone in your hapu did something really bad, you still had to live in community with that person, like, you know, for the rest of your life. It was like the communities, the hapu was so small, and you still had to work together, you still had to do things together and stuff. Like, you can have to see that person, you know, like every day or whatever. So it's like the whole thing became that you know, like the entire community was involved in, you know, like these kind of processes. It wasn't just like, oh, this guy like stole your, you know, like dog skin cloak, you know, you gotta like sort it out between you or whatever like that. It was like, no, everyone's gonna sit around and we talk about it. It's like, you know, like why did he steal that? Like, what was it? What was his need? And, you know, like, and so that's carried on to these days where it's like, I know people that have been through transformative justice processes that have been led by Maori orgs that have been like amazingly successful. Like, I know people that have, like, I know people that have been seriously harmed by other people in their community, and now they're friends, and now they, you know, they smile at each other in the street, and, you know, like they, like, it's like they've kind of like even become closer since then through the process of actually, you know, like going through these transformative justice processes. And I know that sounds really like, that sounds wild. Like, you know, there's probably some people listening thinking like, man, like, imagine like this person that has seriously harmed me. I don't think I could ever look them in the eye again. And I think that's kind of like, you know, it's like we kind of have to start organizing towards, you know, like we want to build communities where it's like you would never have to think that, you know, like that you would, you know, that there is like a pathway back for everyone, you know, like, and that therefore, whatever happens, as bad as it might be, there's, you know, we have to build communities that are strong enough and trusting enough and caring enough that we can, you know, that we can find that pathway back for people that do, you know, even really horrific things.
I think it's like that in the queer community as well. Like, we have to have each other's backs, and like try to resolve stuff internally so much of the time. And like, we're, you know, I really love the name Brick by Brick. I think it's fantastic. Like, I yeah, like we're trying to make a way of dealing with stuff that doesn't just like put people, like just completely throw people away, but also like, I don't know, I get, yeah, I'm itching to reference more Graeber shit. Fuck. Okay. There's a
everyone take a shot really every time Soph says David Graeber.
David Graeber has another really good book called On Kings, and he talks in there about the concept of the stranger king, right? Which is like kings throughout history were more respected when they were like kind of someone who'd conquered everyone, basically. And the idea of like punitive justice has so much to do with like that the state can enact the same thing to everyone. And some of the bases of like liberal understanding of what's wrong with policing now is like the state isn't doing the same thing to everyone, when actually it's like the state shouldn't be doing shit to anybody at all. Like Tim was just saying about like, you know, like, you know, the settler state having no right to like take Maori kids away or whatever. Like, you know, that's completely fucked. And I think like, I don't know, yeah, like we're living under a common agreement that there's this like super entity, this massive thing that can do whatever the fuck it wants. And our biggest gripe is often just that like it doesn't do it the same terrible things to everyone the same. And like we deserve better than that. We like deserve to get to just take care of each other instead.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's to take that into like concrete examples of kind of reforms and things that are being proposed, or even like campaigns that say they might be like, you know, a step towards abolition, but it's like you have to like really make sure that it's going to be that and that it doesn't get taken into reform, right? Like just collecting statistics on things like how racist joint enterprise legislation is could just lead to them being like, well, let's apply it more equally across young people regardless of their race. You know, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to be like, because we know these laws are just mechanisms to enforce racism, that's why we need to get rid of these kinds of laws altogether, right? Like it's that It's why we need to like get people out of prison. We need to make people less vulnerable to being criminalized instead of just focusing on these like small things that just are like, oh, well, let's identify this and then let the state decide on administering it more fairly. Like, no, it's the system itself that is the issue. Right?
Yeah. Like, don't talk to cops isn't just a piece of advice for in the moment you and your buddies are doing something that you want the cops to not know about. It's a way of life. Like, you want a world where you never ever talk to cops because you don't endorse the prison system, the entire like thing.
And also it's chatting to your friend who's thinking about applying to being a cop and talking to them about why that's not a great career field for them to go into. Like, this is also the work of being in community with people, because it's people in community with somebody who's a cop or a prison guard. And you need to chat to them about their line of work and why they chose to do it. Or you have a friend who's like got an application to be a security guard for G4S, and you need to chat to them about why that's not the best thing to do, right? Because a lot of times, like, this is another gripe that I have, I think, with a lot of people who are so-called leftists. It's like you walking around with all this wonderful socialist knowledge in your head, and everybody around you is being sucked in by all the systems, and you're not sharing that knowledge that you have. So that's why I think for Cradle, we focus so much on political education and skill sharing, and, you know, not positioning ourselves as experts, but just positioning ourselves as people who are also experimenting with this, because so much of this is stuff that we have to do in our everyday lives as well. Like, and we always talk about kill the cop in your head, because there's times when I've been in situations where I'm like, bro, somebody come get this man, right? But nobody's gonna come and get them, right? No one's outside person's gonna swoop in and save the situation. Right. And that's how we've been trained from, you know, being kids and having conflict and, oh, go tell the teacher, you know. So we've always thought that this outside person is going to come in and solve the situation. And so I think, we have to get more active about how do we actually translate the things that we're learning into our day-to-day lives and share them with the people around us, even when it's hard or sticky or difficult. Because if we're not doing that work with those people that we're in community or family or hang out with or work with, then who's doing it?
Yeah, I think the state is aware of that as well. Like, there was I was in the cinema the other day, shout out Peck and Plex, and they were the trailers were running before, and like okay, so like the Met has bumped up there for non-Brits. The Met, one of the oldest and shittiest forms of modern policing, have since the like high profile pointing out that one of their cops was a rapist and murderer.
That's right.
They've been stepping up their recruitment campaigns, and they keep on putting people of color like front and center in those, and like all of the ads on the tube and shit, it's always like a cop who's a person of color to be like, hey, see, it's inclusive policing. And there was this fucking ad which ran. And I think this is what I mean when I say I think the state is aware of this, what you're saying, Chelsea. Like, it was this ad that this black guy talking about his sister, and she's a black woman. I think she's also Muslim. And he's talking about he's like, I had all these fears about her joining the Met, because what if I've heard that they're racist and they'll all be sexist, and what if they discriminate against her because of her religion as well? But ever since she's done it, she's been so happy, and it's all great, and she's having a great time. And like, so like I have a bit of a personal policy that when like the absolute most vile propaganda of the capitalist system is played in public places, someone should be yelling about how wrong it is, and if nobody else is, it's gonna be me. So like I'm just like loudly being like, oh, are they just running this as if we all don't know about Sarah Everard? Are they just running this right now as if we all don't like completely know what the Met does? But like, I think they're targeting exactly what you just said, that like they know loads of people will be about to apply to be a cop, and someone in their life will be like, hey, don't fucking do that. And they're trying to run the opposite. Like, they're literally trying to not even target the people who would be potential cops. They're trying to target people in that ad who would say, don't be a cop, and tell them that it's going to be fine. It's like so fucked.
Yeah. And it's what it is it's this reaction to the movement that's been drawing attention to racism within the police, to the the way that these systems function, and they are like constantly doing this damage control, right? And so they're like, and they're specifically targeting marginalized communities, like you said, for their recruitment. And what that will translate to is further surveillance and disruption and violence in our communities, and violence, not just in terms of like, oh, there's a cop in your like friendship group, so they're more likely to call the cops. No, but like people who become prison guards and become cops and stuff, like, it's a horrible job. And so then you end up taking it out on the people around you. Like the reality, like that advert that you saw, they specifically say that, but it's specifically because it's a lie. Like the actual opposite is true. Like when a prison is built in a town and people in that town start working in that prison, the domestic violence rates go up. Right?
Yep.
Because it's such a horrible job to be doing that to people, that, and it's going to attract like the worst elements of you. It's going to bring all of those things out. So then, you know, and you're treated so badly in those jobs, it's so horrible, all of these things, you then take it out within your community, and there's less accountability, right? If you're a cop, you're now protected by the state. So if you wanted to be an abuser, now's your chance, right? And so it creates more violence within our marginalized communities. And it's just so important to like identify, like, it's a flat lie that it will make us more safe, that it will help the way that we are treated by the police, by any of this, because your allegiance becomes to that institution in order for you to survive within that institution, and then you turn on your own people.
Yeah, I like, the thing I'm always saying is like, most serial killers have applied and failed to get to be police officers. So what do you call a serial killer who passed the entrance exam?
So
not guilty.
So literally so many of them have got legal experience, have used like the ways that cops work in order to identify like, oh, this is the way to get away with it. Like, yeah. So
you two have to head off pretty soon. So we have some questions from the chat. We have a Q&A section. I'm just saying this now, so if anyone in the chat has a question and didn't know that you were going to head off in about 15 minutes, then ask it now. We'll log it. We'll ask Chelsea and Kelsey. So, but in the meantime, some people have already asked questions and we've held them. So Disabled Jess asked, do you do training for different community groups on how to take on these approaches, including groups which are not exclusively for people of color? I know trans orgs which would massively benefit from developing their transformative justice practices. Yeah, we'll give a quick answer to that one. Yes, we do. You can email us. We'll work with any group that feels like they're aligned with the values of transformative justice and want to explore these things.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
Cool.
In that case, Tim?
Yeah, well, B-Rat has one here saying, not sure if it's a good question for the stream, but what if you give someone critique and they just point blank ignore it? Do you just keep trying, or should you stop being in community with them? That's an interesting one. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I guess there's a lot within that of like, how are you giving that critique? What is the critique? How deep is it, right? Is this someone who can't take, oh, I'd like you to, you know, wash that dish that you left there? About that, or is it something like very big that you're trying to critique about them? I think for me, and not to be like, but like, I guess for me, I really like to think about values when I'm thinking about giving people feedback, right? And it's like, some people, you're unlikely to listen to feedback if someone's giving it in a way that means that like it's not aligning with like what you're actually concerned about, right? If it's not like within your values. And so trying to like work with people in your life to like understand like, what is it that's important to them? What are our shared values, and what are the things that I can be like, well, we've talked about this, and like I don't think that behavior really aligned with that thing that you said is your own principles, your own values, right? So it's like, it's that self-accountability thing, right? It's not about just being like, I'm just gonna keep saying this until you believe it, but it's like, how can we actually like help people like get to that place themselves? I do think, of course, if someone's being then harmful in return, then like there may be a point where you're like, I can't do this, I've got to put a boundary here, right? But it's not like cut and dry, I guess. I think trying to just give one conversation is like unlikely to work, like I'd said before as well. I don't know if Chelsea, you have thoughts on this.
Sometimes Okay, I have two things about this. One of them is kind of like old lady wisdom and what my grandmother would say. Sometimes someone shows you through their behavior that you don't have values that align.
Yeah.
Someone has showed me before that. I thought we were friends, and what friendship means to you and what friendship means to me are two different things, right? So I could sit here and try and, convince you that what you did is wrong and this is why it hurt me and everything. So it's like what I'm saying is you also have to have a bit of discernment in the situation to understand, okay, like if you're just resistant to all critique, sometimes people are shitty. Can we also say that sometimes people are not self-aware, not kind, not, empathetic. Sometimes someone just doesn't care that they're having a negative impact on you. And in that case, yes, you absolutely have to draw a boundary and say, you know what? I care about me. I respect me, even if you don't, and I don't deserve this kind of behavior. Yeah. But then on the other side, so I feel like sometimes we also have to gauge, like, if you keep trying to talk to someone about their behavior and they're never willing to be reflective, they're never willing to, think about it from a different vantage point, different perspective, that person is showing you that they're unwilling to be accountable for their behavior. So they're showing you they're not ready to be in a certain type of relationship or a certain type of community with you. And I think sometimes also we have to believe people and stop wanting to hold them to a level of emotional maturity that they've not yet reached. Like that person is unwilling to be accountable for basic things that they do. They need to grow up some more. And maybe you just can't, rock with them that way. So yes, on the one hand, absolutely what Kelsey said, it's about the approach and how you talk to them as well. But the most important thing I feel like is that piece of discernment and recognizing, okay, is this a repetitive behavior or this kind of one-off thing? Because one of my friends act wild, did something wildly out of their character in a one-off situation. And then I tried to talk to them about it and they're like, whatever, I don't want to hear it. I know there's something much deeper there.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They might have been triggered. Something might have happened. They might have, right? So there's something deeper there. And so we have a deeper relationship. I'm going to dig into that. But on the other hand, if I don't know you that well and you just start acting crazy like that and I'm trying to call it out and you're brushing it off, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to stick around and be mistreated, right? So I think that's where the discernment piece kicks in.
Yeah. To add something from personal experience, like, if we're talking about like living by our values, one thing that I would want to like caution people with is like, if you are trying to practice transformative justice and something that you think is like people who've been harmed by this person don't need to be around this person. If they're harming you, that includes you, like live by your principles. Like this is something that I like, not to get too into any details, but like just put a lot of work into someone trying to help them then to do better, and then like eventually realize actually they're just being incredibly abusive to me all the time, and like now we don't talk anymore. And it's like to answer the question about like to point back to the question about like should I stop being in community with this person? If they're hurting you, that's just like if that's what you believe, like you have a right to, like just don't let like a commitment to trying to help people change allow you to just get like hurt yourself. But also to reiterate what Kelsey said, like it's not going to be just one conversation. So like, it's worth putting the work in when you're very invested in someone. It's also worth taking care of yourself because you're a person who is worth taking care of.
Yeah. And I think like another thing about this is, when we're talking about like, hitting someone up about something like that, like I think it can be good to, if it is like, we're talking about building community, is to not just, like, I mean, you can hit up someone one-on-one if you think that's the best way to do it, but if sometimes it's a better way to approach it as a community and talk with your other friends and be like, hey, have you noticed how he's been, like this dude has been saying these things recently, like we should all make the effort to, if he says things like that we should, we should speak up. Because if it's just one person, then, like people be like, he could just be like, oh, that's Tim, and he's just like always annoying about that, social justice shit or whatever, but like if everyone's pushing back, then, like I think there's more incentive for them to actually think about what they're saying and be like, oh, okay, actually, actually Andrew Tate isn't the top G, you know, like, you know, like
I love you, Tim, for saying that. And I just
thanks.
want to give you a bullhorn, because I think that so many men and masculine people who are struggling with self-worth and also struggling with understanding the shifts and changes in society and what that means for them are being sucked into that super toxic, fascist wormhole. And it breaks my heart, because I think that there is so much love and acceptance for men that toxic masculinity does not offer them. So I just want to appreciate you for saying that. Or just like, thank you for saying that so much. Any space that you're in and you get shit for talking shit about Andrew Tate, just know that I love you for it. I think we need more masculine men to say, no, that's not what the fuck being a man is about. And I just have to emphatically say that, because that's terrible. And again, that's a lot of violence and ways of using power to exploit other people, using your money, using capitalism, using misogyny and control over women, sex, your body, what type of clothes you wear, what type of watch you have, all of these things to define your value as a person, you know? So sorry, I will get off the soapbox of Andrew Tate.
It's worth saying. We're talking about men too much. It's counter-revolutionary. Let's get back to the questions.
No, we need men for the revolution.
No,
it's want to take out the trash.
We appreciate you appreciating Tim. He is a token himbo. Like we have a question from Shafiq Mogg, who said, "Could someone please explain the differences between restorative and transformative justice?"
Sure, yeah. I'll try to do it in sort of a simple way. And there's absolutely within transformative justice as a model, often people use like restorative justice circles and some of the practices as one of the tools that might be, if people do want that. I guess like kind of the reason that people have been using transformative justice as opposed to restorative justice, like using that language, has been, from my understanding, because restorative justice, there's like an implication and often sort of a process that's looking towards, I guess, well, and this is the thing, I think there are restorative justice practitioners who would disagree that this is actually how it works, right? But I think the concept behind, or often what people say when they think of restorative justice, is they're thinking like, oh, so we were just restoring the situation. We're like moving to a place of restoring the relationship, and we're just like putting it into like, we're just trying to get to a place where like we've resolved the conflict and like it's restored, but we're not necessarily in a new place. Whereas transformative justice is really looking at like transforming the conditions as to like how this happened, on a cultural level, on a community level, and a structural level, as well as what happens sort of within individuals. In restorative justice, there absolutely is space within those circles to talk about why something happened, like what the person who caused harm was feeling. Like there can be like a lot of transformation within a circle, absolutely. But yeah, I guess like transformative justice as a model is really focusing on like looking at the roots of the issues, and is like a wider range of practices that look at that like wider transformation. I hope that.
I would add one tiny piece which helped me, which is that, and one of the reasons that I love transformative justice is that the person who caused harm does not have to be involved for a transformative process to happen, for us to address it. So it's like, say we all went out on a night out and like something terrible happened in our friend group, and we've actually excommunicated the friend who like did the unacceptable thing, like roofied us, for example. We've excommunicated that friend, and we're actually not in community with that person anymore. So we're not actually trying to like restore the relationship with that person. We've decided we don't want them to be in our friend group anymore. But actually the other 6 of us who got roofied, like, yo, we still have to heal from this. We have to talk about this. We have to address this. Like, we've still been affected by it. We still, and now moving forward, when we go out, like, how are we going to respond to, how we feel about each other? all of those things can still take place in a transformative process, even if the person who caused the harm is not there and not involved. And I think transformative is powerful as well, because you can have multiple transformative processes going on at the same time. So say this person caused harm and they're in their community having a transformative process, and this person who's been harmed, right, they're in their community have a transformative process, right? So it's really expansive and open, and I think it gives a lot more wiggle room to a lot of survivors who like don't really want to have a restorative process with the person who harmed them, don't really want to have shit to do with them, could really care less if they become a better person. And that's real, because there's no correct way to respond to, being harmed. So we had to make room for people who don't want to help them. I don't want to chat to them. We have to have space and room for those people as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, thank you so much for like that nuance, Chelsea, because I think that's why restorative justice has been somewhat co-opted into the criminal justice system, right? Because of that emphasis still on the person who caused the harm and not so much on the survivor. And within transformative justice, that's why transformative justice can't be wedged into a criminal
it's incompatible
process. Whereas restorative processes, it's often now like there's like 100 restorative justice organizations in the UK. They all work with the criminal justice system, I think, like pretty much like 99 out of 100 or something.
Right.
Because it's like someone serves time and then they go through a process with the person or the family or whatever who was impacted. And that's part of them getting parole, or that's part of them getting out of prison, and it's gotten co-opted into that. Whereas obviously from how we described transformative justice, you couldn't wedge that into, oh, they served time and now there's transformation.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, we're not going to cause more harm by putting them in a cage.
Yeah.
Before we do any of that self-reflection, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna intervene on violence, absolutely. We might need to like separate people or keep someone away from someone else or these kinds of things, but we're not going to take away their basic needs. We're not going to take like full control over their lives and put them in a cage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think this is a good note to stop on, because I think our guests have to actually go. But
we like to set homework. Our chat a little slots, and they love having homework to do. So Chelsea and Kelsey, do you have any like things people could go away and do if they've enjoyed besides like checking out Cradle community, like next steps people could do if they're interested in this?
Definitely. I mean, if you are interested in hearing more, there's like a lot of great like abolitionist and transformative justice resources that are coming out these days. And of course, we'd love you to buy Brick by Brick, which is published by Hajar Press. I guess maybe I can read some of the like reflective questions that we've got in the book for people to like think about as well. So things like, who could you rely on to support you if you're experiencing violence? Who could give you material support like housing, food and travel money? Who could give you emotional support? Who could help you reflect on your behavior if you caused harm? Who do these people rely on for support? Who could be in your pod if you built stronger relationships with them? And like start mapping like your resources in your community. I think like a first step is just great to be starting to like map who are the people in my life, who is it that I want to be having these conversations with, and how do we plan for potential violence or crises or other things that we're all going to go through in different times, and the ways that we can support each other, because it's very hectic if you wait till harm already happens and then suddenly everyone's like, oh, me, I didn't know I needed to do that, talk about it beforehand. Other questions such as, how do you support your friends to reflect on their actions when they've hurt someone or have done something out of alignment with their values? And think of a time you felt the need to call the police. Can you identify what you needed in that moment, and how else could you have been supported by those around you to get what you needed? So if you are someone who's coming from a place of, I've been in these experiences, I didn't know what else I could do, like let's workshop those things. Let's have a think through of like in what are all the resources that we could build in order to change those situations and not escalate them to the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Homework.
Yes, I'm going to give
Great.
you like some rapid fire things you can do that'll make you feel great. And you can tell your mom about it and she'll be proud of you.
Oh, I love this.
First one is a really cool initiative called Ask Angela. So it's a really simple thing that's been engaged at a lot of bars where essentially the bar staff are there and available, and anyone can go to the bar and just say, hey, is Angela working tonight? And essentially they can get a taxi or Uber or get some support to basically get out of a dangerous situation. If you go out, wherever you go out, your local pub, your local bar, your local restaurant, that place that you and your friends like to go get hammered, go talk to the managers there about Ask Angela. So if it's a place that you hang out in, make sure that Ask Angela is something that the staff is aware of. And it's a really simple concept, and it's something that you can do really easy just on a night out. Just go talk to the staff about Ask Angela and see if they know about it. And that can be a good way of you creating a safer space in a space that you go out in.
Hell yeah.
I had a friend that actually printed out a bunch of them. He was working in like hospital and bars and stuff, and he just printed out a little bunch of like mini poster things and just gave them to his other friends that worked at other bars and was like, do you want to just put this up like out the back in your staff room or something like that, so that, you know, people will see it. And yeah, and you know, just like, I mean, you probably don't want to put it in front of the bar because then people will know what's, you know, like then the bad people will know what's up, but just out the back so that, you know, the staff see it.
There's
often
like, there's often the poster telling you to ask for Angela like in the women's bathroom, so that it's it's still in a space people will see and they'll know to do the thing.
Is that what you guys got in there? I've been wondering.
I will say about that campaign that if you're doing that and like recommending people ask for Angela, to like also recommend the Good Night Out campaign, so that the people who work there are actually trained to know what to do if someone asks for Angela, to know how to respond to disclosures, or to, because like the poster, like I don't think that campaign actually does like that end of it. So working those two together is really great. So then the people who actually work in bars and stuff know how to respond to someone being like, hey, something's happened, like I feel really like not okay with it, like so to combine those.
Awesome.
And then the last thing I would just say is the next time you're in a situation and you want to rip someone's face off, i.e. you want to be super critical of them, be super mean to them, talk about how horrible of a person they are, how could they have done this terrible thing, think about, well, first off, have you ever done that terrible thing? Because remember what we said earlier about we all have the possibility to experience harm and also perpetrate harm. So it's that first thing of like remembering they're a human being and they're perpetrating harm, but also looking at yourself and saying, is this harming me? Right? First off, because if something is harming you, you always have the right to say, get your fucking foot off my neck, and you don't have to be nice about it. Right? So if something's harming you, you can speak up about it, right? So ask yourself, is this harming me, and or am I in community with this person? Before you jump to, you know, getting all up in their grill, because you know, someone I'm not in community with could be harming me, and I have the right to say that, right? And no one should be policing that, right? So like Dave Chappelle, he can always get the smoke from me because he's transphobic and I don't fuck with that. So I'm not in community with him, but he can always get the smoke, right? Because he's harming me and my homegirls, and I don't like that. So it's like, it's like if it's harming you, speak up about it. And if you're in community with that person, absolutely don't be afraid, because if you really love somebody, you got to be real with them. So if you have friends that have behaviors that you've seen that are problematic and you haven't called it out because you haven't been sure how to, you know, you can check out our resources, the 5Ds, bystander intervention. Think of different ways to have those conversations with your homeboys and the people that are close to you. But the most important thing is that the people you're in community with, that you're willing to lean on them and be a bystander when you're in those situations. And that will empower you to then when you go out in public in society, you feel more empowered and comfortable to be a bystander and for strangers and people that you don't know. So thanks everyone for letting us be here. It's my first ever time on Twitch, so or a stream, or
I hope you had a good first time on a stream.
Yeah, I think you did amazing.
Yeah, you did
both
really
of
well.
you were great. Yeah, really amazing and insightful. Yeah, thanks for all that you do. Thanks for yeah, you know, like everything, the workshops, the publishing, it's great. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be checking out the Spotify playlist as well. I'm gonna be listening to this on my way into on my way into work on the train. Yeah, cool. So thanks for coming along.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool.
Bye.
Thanks. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Cool.
Oh,
Yeah. So
Mule's
our guest
back.
this week, Frozen Mule has returned. R.I.P. Mule. It was so tragic that he fell in a big bin. So
we forgot to grab their social media handles off them before they go.
Right. I know they're on Twitter at Cradle Community. I know that one off the top of my head. Okay, cool.
Oh, we got them in the chat.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
Good.
Connor grabbed them, yeah.
Thank
Great.
you,
So
Conrad.
it looks like it's Cradle Community on Instagram and Twitter. Their website is cradlecommunity.co.uk, and the book is published by Hajar, Hajar Press.com, and the book is called Brick by Brick. So if you want to check out all their stuff, that's where you can find it.
I looked it up, and there's like a bunch of books called Brick by Brick. So it's Brick by Brick,
okay.
How We Build a World Without Prisons. So,
okay, nice.
Yeah.
It's a good name, but too many people have realized that, I guess.
Yeah. There was lots of Lego books about it. So, yeah.
Cool. But, I really like the homework. I think I might have a most based thing next week that comes straight from Chelsea and Kelsey, actually. But yeah, this is cool. Next week we are speaking with someone from the Gaskell Garden Project. Same communist time, same communist channel. And if you want to support what we do, we have a Patreon as well. It's patreon.com/red_planet. It feeds Conrad delicious gruel. So if you like Conrad eating gruel and want him to eat more, then you can go and support us there. But in all seriousness, we want to expand the project to Red Planet. We want to do it even better. And meeting our first goal has let us pay Conrad to be our producer, and he has made the show infinitely better already and continues to all the time. We're way better organized. We have tons more planning meetings and keep on track, and he's also incredible at like reaching out and getting guests. So like we appreciate the hell out of Conrad. If we hit our next goal, we will be getting an editor on. And one of the really cool things about that would be, besides just like sharing around clips on social media or whatever, would be us being able to make some like documentary content. We really want to get out to some of the like climate activist camps and like see what they're up to, and then like cut together little mini features for Red Planet based on that. So yeah, if you help us hit that goal, we'll be able to do that. And also Mule has promised to play a TTRPG with us if you hit that goal. And
that's right. I forgot about that.
Probably equally excited for both, but like whichever one tickles your fancy. If either of them do, those would be what would happen if we could hit our next goal. If you want to check out the Patreon, we have various tiers. We have a $2 tier called Sprite Mode. We have a $10 tier called Goblin Mode, $20 tier called Beast Mode, and you get varying levels of, you get access to the Discord with all of those. You can hang out with us. We still haven't done any of the Discord hangouts, but we're gonna do them for goblins. We also have stickers for goblins. We have pins for beasts. And I guess the last thing to say is that we have a sicko now. So the highest tier of Patreon reward is that, as well as the stickers and the pins and the Discord hangouts, hypothetically, you also get a shout out at the end of the stream. So thank you very much to Goblin Games NZ, who is our current only sicko. The resident sicko of Red Planet. Thank you for helping to make this possible. And everybody check out patreon.com/redplanet.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Cool. So what if I want to hear more from my my good friend Kira Chats? Where can I track her down?
Well, you can find me on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Kira Chats, my Twitter, twitter.com/Kira Chats. Also my socials, which are linked on my Twitter and my Twitch, which I can't, it's Linktree. It's Linktree. My Linktree is Kira Chats, basically.
Cool.
I never know how the URL is actually spelled. The period goes somewhere weird.
Linktree.e.
Linktree.e/Kira Chats. Thank you. And you can check out all my you can check out all my my not safe for work, not allowed on Twitch socials there. So please, yeah. Yeah. But
I thought I was the one who was TOS.
Right. If I want to find someone like Sophie, and maybe Sophie's Twitter when it becomes unsuspended, where can I find that?
I can't promise not to make the same tweet again, because I did. I got like 12-hour lockout for doing this tweet where I said some of my favorite words, and then I got back on Twitter and I just said the same tweet again, and now I have a week off. I can't promise I'm not going to do the same tweet again when I get back on. But if you want to follow me and just see what happens, I'm Sophie_FRM_Mars on Twitter and on Instagram and on Twitch, and I'm Sophie from Mars, all one word, on YouTube and Octodon.social if you're on the Fediverse. I see you. I'm also Sophie from Mars on Tumblr, and yeah, you should check out my Patreon because that is what pays my bills. So that's patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. I just put out my Yay video on YouTube. If people want to check that out, it would be really helpful if people would check that out and especially share it, because I can't tweet about it right now. I'm not allowed. I've been naughty. But if you want to see my other stuff when it's done early, you can do that by giving me $2 or more than $2. But if I wanted to give Tim $2 or multiple dollars.
Before we go to Tim, I should also say we are going to be watching your video together
in 2 days
on my channel in 2 days. Yeah, on Wednesday.
Yep.
So check out Twitch.
Oh wait, I thought we were doing it on Tuesday.
No, I thought. Oh, is it on Tuesday? Hold on, let me make sure.
It's Tuesday. We're doing it on Tuesday.
Okay.
Is it a time zone thing? Is it both days?
No, I was about to say, no.
That happens for me a lot. Like,
yeah,
it's like Monday right now. So
you said that about Saturday earlier. I thought it was really funny. Tim was like, Saturday, so a couple of days ago, and I was like, what? That's yesterday. Oh, right.
So no, you're right. It is Tuesday. So
Tuesday, cool.
So in 2 days at noon in Central. So Sophie will be on my channel. We'll be watching her what seems to be like an extremely like already like taken off really hard video about Kanye West or Ye. So yeah, make sure you hang out on my channel for that. Anyways, but you were saying about Tim, Sophie.
Well, I was saying that I want to give Tim multiple dollars as often as possible. So how would I do that, Tim?
If you're a Tim head, how can you pursue your Tim head?
You can find me we actually started calling them on my stream. We started calling them foreheads. We won't go into the details of that, but yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Dread Conquest, or you can find me on YouTube and Twitch as Conquest of Dread. I have been streaming a little bit more lately. It is at night time for me, so that is like, I don't know when that'll be for most of you, either super late at night or really early in the morning. But no, it's been fun. We just played through Resident Evil 8, and we just started another cool one called Black Book, which seems like a pretty cool game.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'll be doing that probably a couple of nights this week. But yeah, otherwise that's pretty much it. So I think we're gonna sign off from here.
And I think
if you have been mourning the loss of DJ Mule this episode, you can check out DJ Mule at DJ Mule on everything. I think on Twitter it's DJ Mule _, but other than that it's DJ Mule, and Mule works really hard doing really, really good streams because he's a lovely and good boy and we love him. So in his memory, if you go to his stream and do sub off Twitch, that would be a respectful thing to do since he fell in that big bin and is dead now.
He perished in a bin.
And he might come back if enough people
you just have to believe.
Comment and subscribe.
We all just have to subscribe.
He will, after 3 days, he will rise from the bin.
Or he'll just stay in the bin, and maybe he'll just stream from the bin.
He'll be a bin boy.
Bin boy, a little bin peanut.
And now we've plugged all the stuff.
Well, we're going to sign off now. Thank you everyone for showing up and hanging out with us. I hope you had a great time. We'll be back next Sunday. Again, same time, same place. And if you're here, thank you again for finding this the channel. This is a new channel because we used to stream on all of our Twitches instead, except for Tim's, and we used to always do like that. But now we have this new channel. So thank you all for being here. I hope you all drop follows and put on notifications. And we are going to be rating my friend Nicotine. Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So on, and I might even pop into her stream later. Who knows? Because I've been planning on doing that. So make sure you say hi to Nicotine and give her all sorts of praise and love and everything. And thank you, chatters, for being here. And thank you, hosts and guests.
Thank you, Kira.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.